Chapter 2596. In everyone's eyes, Chun Zhao was the scariest demon. Demon power. Chun Zhao discovered something from Yedu Rainster's soul fragment. His power was very similar to Chun Zhao's. They both came from hell and demons. However, he was very different from Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao's power belonged to him, but Yedu Rainster's power was borrowed from a demon. He had to return the borrowed power. When Chun Zhao devoured half of Yedu Rainster's soul, a magic formation suddenly appeared on the ground where Yedu Rainster was lying. A demonic hand reached out from the formation and grabbed Yedu Rainster's soul. The demonic hand emanated a terrifying aura. Even if it was just a hand, Chun Zhao's eyes flashed with displeasure. As he grabbed Yedu Rainster with one hand, he smashed the demonic hand with the other. The demonic hand was smashed into pieces. Who is it? The magic formation suddenly turned into an abyss. A terrifying and angry voice spread from the depths of the abyss. Fuck you. Chun Zhao held Yedu Rainster's soul and floated in the air. He retorted at the owner of the voice in the abyss. The owner of that demonic hand was a great lord-class demon. But so what? Just a little bit of power was already the limit of a demon lord. This bit of power wasn't even enough to scratch an itch for Chun Zhao. Even if his real body could come to the human world, Chun Zhao wouldn't be afraid of him. Human, I'll remember your aura. Just you wait. The greater demon overlord could only say some harsh words and not continue to infiltrate his power. He could also feel Chun Zhao's aura. Chun Zhao was at the same level as him. Unless his true body appeared, no matter how much power he used, it would all be useless. The greater demon overlord also understood that the two sides were separated by a world. Thus, they couldn't do anything to each other. Now that he was on Chun Zhao's main battlefield, he was even more helpless. The so-called threatening words were just giving himself a way out when he couldn't do anything. Chun Zhao glanced at the half-dead Yedu Rainster in his hand. Most of his soul had been eaten by Chun Zhao. At the moment, his mind wasn't clear. Every time Chun Zhao bit off a piece of soul, he gained more. Unlike when he absorbed the Black Dragon's soul, he only obtained a small number of fragments. This time, Chun Zhao's devouring method was more direct. As a result, the knowledge gained would also increase. Chun Zhao had a rough understanding of Yedu's power. Yedu Rainster had been a magician for hire in his early years. Not to mention leading a great battle. Every time he went on the battlefield, he was surrounded by danger. However, his luck was not bad. He picked up a ring with a demonic mark. The original owner of this ring had a contract with that greater demon overlord. It was a very simple contract, similar to the modern usury. The greater demon lord would lend its power to the contractor in exchange for a soul sacrifice. Of course, the sacrifices were all other people's souls. However, the souls sacrificed each time were only counted as interest. Yedu Rainster was indeed a capable person. His predecessor was abandoned because he was unable to repay the interest of the previous greater demon overlord. However, Yedu Rainster had maintained this state for 1,500 years, and half of that time had been spent in slumber. Under such circumstances, he could still repay the interest of the greater demon overlord. One could imagine how many souls he had sacrificed in the past. Even the greater demon overlord admired Yedu Rainster. He felt that Yedu was a promising talent. Every time Yedu Rainster obtained a new body, he would receive a gift from the greater demon overlord, giving him a longer life than normal people. Of course, this admiration came with a price. Yedu Rainster's conflict with the greater demon overlord became even more complicated. The greater demon overlord could even sense Yedu Rainster's condition. For example, just now, Yedu Rainster's soul had been severely damaged. Using the contract, the greater demon overlord sent his power into the human world. He wanted to take back what Yedu Rainster owed him with interest. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to protect their spoils of war. Only Chun Zhao dared to face a greater demon overlord head-on. The magic formation gradually dissipated. Chun Zhao looked at the incomplete soul in his hand. He didn't plan on letting Yedu Rainster go. As for Nawats Singh and Delamore, their senses were much more stimulated than the owlets. After all, The owlets had only felt the impact of their naked eyes. But the two of them were facing a terrifying pressure that seemed to be solid. Facing an enemy like that, they didn't even have the courage to resist. They couldn't shatter the demon's hand like Chun Zhao had. Chun Zhao was silent for a long time. He muttered the demon's name in his heart. Shane Kaslafar. It wasn't a good thing to be targeted by a greater demon overlord. Perhaps Shane Kaslafar thought that he couldn't enter hell. But that didn't mean he didn't want to take revenge. Perhaps he couldn't fight Chun Zhao head-on in the human world. But if he wanted to create some trouble for Chun Zhao, it wouldn't be a problem. Clearly, Shane didn't know that Chun Zhao remembered his vicious words. Chun Zhao had always adhered to the principle of never waiting for revenge. Moreover, he wanted to use Shane Kaslafar for a small experiment. After devouring Yadu Rainster's soul, Chun Zhao had a clearer understanding of Shane Kaslafar. Of course, Yadu Rainster was only Shane Kaslafar's second party. His understanding of Shane Kaslafar was very limited. Chun Zhao glanced at the owlets. Little Neil's body appeared in the dark lava. He was sound asleep. Little Neil was sent to the owlets. Chun, what's wrong with him? Delamore asked. His soul is severely damaged, Chun Zhao said calmly. If you had come to me during the first 1 or 2 days after his body was taken, his soul wouldn't have been so badly damaged. But a week has passed, and half of his soul has been absorbed by that guy. Just now, I forced that guy out of the child's body, so his soul was torn even more. Why did you do that? You could have saved my child. Owlet stared at Chun Zhao angrily. Chun Zhao glanced at her indifferently. What do you think I should have done? I've already done everything I could. If you think that I didn't care about your son and let him become nourishment for that soul, then I'm sorry, but I was wrong. Chapter 2597. Facing the cowering couple. Chun Zhao didn't want to argue with them. Chun Zhao didn't want to bother with the couple who loved their son too much. At least, they dared to speak rudely to him when he was scary. It showed their love for their child. Chun Zhao wasn't in a good mood, but he still turned and left. Under their gazes, Chun Zhao soared into the sky and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. Hey, old Zhang, I want to ask you something. You rarely talk to me in such a serious tone. What is it? Is there a demonic path in this world? Ha! What you looking at that made you dumbfounded? No, there's no absolute demonic path in this world. There are evil sects, but there are no demonic paths. So you're saying that techniques that can absorb people's vitality don't exist, like in movies and novels. There are cultivation techniques or spells that can absorb one's essence, chi, and spirit, but I've never heard of a cultivation technique that can absorb one's vitality. Why? You meant one? Chun Zhao didn't want to tell Zhang Tianyi that he'd learned a technique that could absorb other people's vitality. He was worried that Zhang Tianyi wouldn't be able to control his inner demon. After all, it was normal for people to be more afraid of death as they grew older, to prolong one's life. Who knew if he would do something that would cross the line? Chun Zhao didn't dare to overestimate anyone's morality, even if the person was highly respected. Chun Zhao suddenly thought of a possibility. The heavenly pattern of the small world was like a growing sapling. The flesh and blood were like nutrients for the heavenly pattern. But Chun Zhao wasn't sure if everyone's small world and heavenly pattern were the same. Or, did you learn a technique that absorbs other people's vitality? Zhang Tianyi seemed to have sensed something. Chun Zhao still answered Zhang Tianyi's question with silence. Zhang Tianyi seemed to confirm his guess. After a while, Zhang Tianyi said, "Can you tell me the specifics?" Chun Zhao was hesitating whether to tell Zhang Tianyi. But if Zhang Tianyi activated the heavenly pattern himself, he would eventually come into contact with it. The difference was nothing more than a question of whether it was a little earlier or a little later. In the end, Chun Zhao told Zhang Tianyi his discovery. Zhang Tianyi was silent for a while. "Are you afraid that I'll go down the wrong path? Don't you think I should be afraid?" Chun Zhao was really afraid that one day he would be on the opposite side of Zhang Tianyi. For an existence at Zhang Tianyi's level, no one would be able to keep him in check once he harbored evil thoughts. Chun Zhao was the only person in the world who could fight against him. I already have some guesses about your situation. You have a guess. What you're absorbing isn't the life force in the flesh, but the nutrients. Zhang Tiany's guess seemed to be very consistent with his own. You and I both know that the higher one's cultivation, the longer one's lifespan will be. However, the key question is, how is the process of transforming power into lifespan achieved? What you've discovered just proves that the process of transforming power into lifespan, although we haven't completely analyzed it, it has already taken us a big step forward. Zhang Tiany paused for a moment, then continued. The flesh that your enemy summoned was made entirely out of mana and didn't have any life force. However, your heaven and earth heavenly pattern was able to absorb it. This means that you weren't absorbing the life force of the flesh, but transforming it. You're already a big step ahead of the three of us. In fact, your progress is even faster than we imagined. In the next 100 years, you'll have enough time to become the world's top cultivator. And in the spiritual tide era after that, you'll be the best in the world. Zhang Tiany's tone was a bit emotional, but also a bit envious. He wasn't envious of Chen Zhao's cultivation, but of his era. In the age of chaos, Chen Zhao's cultivation had almost reached the peak. His cultivation was enough for him to last until the spiritual tide era, and he even had a lot to spare. Moreover, with his surging life force, he didn't need to be like other cultivators of the same realm who didn't dare to fight even when they were old. For example, the 23rd generation Blood Mary. Her cultivation was indeed the best in the world. But now, she was like an ordinary old person. Even the slightest movement would hurt her muscles and bones. Every time she fought, she would use up a large amount of life force. To put it bluntly, the next 200 years would belong to Chen Zhao. And Chen Zhao wasn't just the best in terms of power. More importantly, he had thick skin and flesh. He had almost indestructible physical defense and terrifying magic resistance. This also eliminated the danger of him dying. Killing Chen Zhao was almost as difficult as destroying a modern country, and a country with nuclear weapons. After communicating with Zhang Tiany, Chen Zhao suddenly felt happy. So he wasn't absorbing life force. Next, he would go to hell and kill the threat in the cradle. Chen Zhao took out another phone and called the handsome guy. Hi. The video call went through. Chen Zhao saw a battlefield, a terrifying one. It was a scene of billions of demons fighting against a terrifying dragon, while the handsome young man stood in the air. Chen Zhao remembered that terrifying dragon, ancestral dragon. He had been lucky enough to accept the handsome guy's invitation and ride on ancestral dragon once. For Chen Zhao back then and now, it was an extremely honorable thing. Rather than a battle, it was more like a one-sided massacre. Although there were countless of them, they were facing the most powerful dragon clan. When his wings were spread out, they could cover an entire city. A single breath from him could turn millions of evil demons into ashes. What are you doing? Chen Zhao asked. Watching a massacre, the handsome guy said emotionlessly. It was indeed a massacre. The billions of demons Chen Zhao saw were only the remnants of the defeated army. The battlefield stretched across the boundless realm. Countless demon corpses were still lying on the ground. I need to go to hell. Can you summon me there? Why do you want to go to hell? Chen Zhao told them the whole story. Simply put, he had to get rid of the root of the problem. Okay, now, yes. This was Chen Zhao's first time seeing a summoning. In the past, when Beelzebub's Zophi summoned him, he could only see traces of a magic array left behind. However, the handsome young man's summoning was much simpler. He casually raised his hand, and the demon corpses below seemed to be affected by some kind of power. Their blood began to gather in the air, and a magic array hovering in the air was completed. Chapter 2598. In the blink of an eye, Chen had arrived in hell. The scene from a video was completely different from the feeling of being in a boundless battlefield. Even high up in the sky, Chen still couldn't see the end of the battlefield. Ancestral Gragon also sensed Chen's arrival. He still had some impression of this human. But to him, Chen was just a small interlude. It didn't affect his killing spree. Chen had an idea. Ancestral Gragon, do you still need these corpses? Why? Even if you use them as food, they're the most disgusting food. The handsome guy answered matter-of-factly. Do you need them? I'm not sure if I need them. The handsome guy gestured for Chun to go ahead. Chun landed on the battlefield. Even without Chen's control, the heavenly patterns in the small world were already absorbing the blood on the ground. Chun could feel that the small world was growing rapidly. The heavenly patterns in the small world were also flourishing. Chun was shocked. Why was the growth speed of the heavenly patterns faster than all the cultivation he'd done after activating them? One must know that his heavenly runes had been nurtured in the river diagram for several years at the very least. But in just a few minutes, Chen's heavenly patterns had at least doubled in size. After a closer look, Chen found the problem. Within the range of Chen's little world, a corpse caught Chen's attention. Even though the corpse was already dead, it was still emitting a powerful aura. It was the corpse of a greater demon lord. The greater demon lord's corpse wasn't very large, but the aura it emitted was terrifying beyond compare. No wonder. Chen's heart skipped a beat. Raising his hand, a wave of energy descended from the air and blasted the corpse of the greater fiend overlord. Flesh and blood splattered in an instant. Chun greedily absorbed the greater demon lord's power. Although the amount of life force he could produce wasn't much, compared to Chen's total life force, it was just a drop in the ocean. But the heavenly patterns in Chen's small world were flourishing. Compared to ancestral Gragon, Chen was more like a trash picker, but Chen was very happy to pick them up. Just then, the handsome guy's voice reached Chen's ears. 1,000 miles ahead of you, there are 2 greater demon lords' corpses. Chen looked up at the handsome guy in the sky and nodded slightly. The value of the nearby greater demon overlord had basically been sucked dry by Chen. Chun Zhao ran straight to where the handsome guy was pointing. Although the corpses of the 2 greater demon overlords were inconspicuous, they were very easy to find. That was because they exuded an extraordinary aura. After absorbing the essence of the first great demon lord, Chun felt that the power of his little world had more than doubled. Rather than strength, it should be called growth. Chun used the same trick again, frantically absorbing the power of the 2 greater demon overlords as nutrients for the minor world pattern. Although the amount of life force was better than nothing, the growth of the small world had reached an astonishing level. The coverage of the small heaven and earth did not increase by much. Instead, it was more of an internal growth. The diameter of the pocket world was originally a little over 1,000 meters. Even after cultivating for a long time, it only extended to about 1,100 meters. Currently, the diameter of the small world was about 1,300 meters. Proportionally speaking, it had indeed grown a lot. However, compared to the increase in range, Chen was more concerned about the internal growth. After absorbing the essence of the 2 greater demon overlords, the power of Chen's little world had increased by at least 10 times. This was not the effect of 1 plus 1. The difference between a 200-kilogram fatty and a 200-kilogram strong man was not just a little. In the past, Chen's little world had always been fat. It was huge, even bigger than Zhang Tianyi, 23rd Blood Mary, and Bifla's little world combined. However, in terms of strength, it was even weaker than them. After Jin activated his little world, the situation had improved considerably. Now, after a few internal growth, Chen's little world was much stronger than before. Just then, the handsome guy's voice sounded again. Your domain is very special. Special? Chen's heart skipped a beat. What's so special about it? Your domain has no attributes, but has the ability to break down and reassemble other people's energy. Break down and reassemble? Chen was a little dazed. Even he could not understand the principles behind his little world patterns operation. However, the handsome guy could see the principles behind his little world pattern at a glance. Everyone's domain is different, right? Actually, everyone's domain is the same. No matter how it manifests, the effect is the same. It absorbs spiritual energy from the outside world and transforms it into your own magic. Of course, it manifests differently, but the essence is the same. For example, you can use your domain to create neutron stars. That's the difference in manifestation. However, your domain can break down and reassemble other people's energy. That's very special. After all, Chun and the handsome guy were a Pacific Ocean apart, so Chun could only barely understand part of the content. The more profound questions, such as what the handsome guy had said about breaking down and reassembling other people's energy, all Jin could understand was the literal meaning. Also, the greater demon overlord you're looking for is in that direction. The handsome guy pointed Chun in that direction. Thank you. You're welcome. Also, don't forget my request. It's already in progress. That's good. I'll go there first. If there's time, we could talk again. Go. It'll be a tough battle, the handsome guy said. Is that Shane Kaslafar very strong? The handsome guy suddenly smiled. If I reveal the answer now, it'll be very boring. You should experience the battle yourself. Trust me, it'll be very meaningful to you. Hearing the guy's words, Chun could not help but be curious. What kind of battle would be meaningful to him? Chun did not know how far away Shane Kaslafar was from him. Anyway, if he followed the direction the handsome guy had pointed out, he would definitely be right. Chun moved forward in energy form, so he was naturally very fast. He also intentionally hid his aura. Shane Kaslafar remembered his aura. If Chun approached him, he would definitely sense it and raise his guard. Chapter 2599. In the southwest of Hell, in the center of the Black Land, there is a huge volcano that never calmed down. This volcano was called the Volcano of Despair. The volcano was tens of thousands of meters tall, and hot magma bubbled in the crater all year round. The diameter of the crater was even more shocking than the height of the volcano. It was 200,000 meters in diameter, more than enough to put a town inside. Within millions of square kilometers, it was all black land. There was no vegetation at all, and no demons or forces dared to stay here. As long as it was black, it only belonged to a demon. Shane Kazrafa, the lava demon. This used to be one of the few rich countries in Hell, a country that belonged to demons. The nature of demons was difficult to restrain and manage, so demon kingdoms were rare existences in the vast Hell. Compared to the long lifespans of demons, demon countries could only exist for a very short time. 1,000-year kingdom was already considered a long time. Thousands of years ago, Shane Kazrafa came. In just one night, the supervolcano erupted with world-destroying lava. Then, the demon country was razed to the ground. The name of the lava demon also resounded in the Black Land. In the following thousands of years, Shane Kazrafa continued to wreak havoc on this land. In the end, this fertile land became a wasteland. In the crater, on the floating island where the lava had not spread, a 20-meter-tall red demon sat on his lava throne. Just then, a figure descended from the sky and landed directly in the lava, causing huge waves. The figure gradually floated up from the lava pool. Standing above the pool, the lava under his feet instantly cooled and turned into black stones. Lanka, I don't like people messing around in my territory. Shane Kazrafa looked at the newcomer with dissatisfaction. Messing around? You're saying I'm messing around? I'm an honored guest you've invited. This demon, named Lanka, was almost the same size as a standard human. However, his skin was pale, and there was a pair of demon horns on his head. Shane Kazrafa was very unhappy with Lanka's provocation. Don't forget where this is, and don't forget who I am. Of course I remember, Lord Kazrafa. Ronko's tone was filled with obvious disdain, completely provoking Shane Kazrafa. However, Lang Kaz suddenly saw that half of Shane Kazrafa's left arm was gone. Hey, Kazrafa, you're actually injured. I'm very curious who broke your arm. With your injury, you won't be able to recover in less than 10 years. Shane's face darkened. It has nothing to do with you. If you think you can do whatever you want in front of me, just because I'm injured, you're gravely mistaken. Due to the injury to his arm, his strength had decreased. However, this was his main battlefield after all. He was not afraid of any enemy, even if it was his old enemy, Ice Calamity Lang Ko. Suddenly, a huge shadow appeared above the two greater demon overlords. Lanka and Shane Kaslafar both looked up and saw a huge black monster with a lion's head and a bird's body. This monster was hundreds of times bigger than Shane Kaslafar. Enfant Nelly. The two demons revealed a look of fear. The huge monster called Onfanelli landed at the edge of the crater. Kiki, Kazrafa, what happened to your broken arm? Onfanelli let out a strange laugh. Shane Kazrafa's expression was very ugly. It seemed like the first thing everyone did when they arrived was laugh at his broken arm. After that, the greater devil overlords from various places appeared one after another. There were more than 30 of them, and they were all terrifying existences. The first thing these 30 greater demon overlords did was laugh at Shane Kazrafa's broken arm. Kazrafa, did you sacrifice your arm to Lord Alpha? Ha! Nicolo, you actually know how to joke. Enough. I didn't call you here today to make fun of me. Shane Kazrafa roared. Isn't that so? I called you here today because of Lord Alpha's order. Shane Kazrafa took out a crimson token. All the greater demon overlords instantly shut up. A trace of respect appeared in their eyes. They were all Demon King Alpha's vassals. Does anyone else have any objections? Lord Alpha ordered us to go to Obsidian City, Shane Kazrafa said calmly. Not any of you, but all of us. Obsidian City? That Beelzebub Zophie? There's also his wife, Iris. Lord Alpha has ordered that the couple is not allowed to continue living. He's His Majesty Beelzebub's direct subordinate. If so many of us go together, won't we anger His Majesty? His Majesty Beelzebub is supreme, but why would he care about such a small matter? Of course, although Shane Kazrafa said it was a small matter, everyone knew that it wasn't. But they all knew that it wasn't a small matter. They all knew the entanglement within. It wasn't that Demon King Beelzebub didn't care about such a small matter. It was just that it wasn't convenient for him to intervene. But it didn't mean that he couldn't do anything. They were Alpha's vassals. But compared to Beelzebub, Alpha and Beelzebub were completely different. Beelzebub was the supreme great demon king, and Alpha was only a secondary demon king. It seemed like they were only one level apart. But this one level was a gap that could never be made up for. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, there was once when more than 50 secondary demon kings tried to overthrow a great demon king. And the target that they thought could be overthrown was great demon king Beelzebub. More than 50 secondary demon kings and thousands of greater demon overlords gathered an innumerable demon army. Then, great demon king Beelzebub appeared. With just one move, he swallowed all the secondary demon kings and all the greater demon overlords, as well as half of the demon army. That was also the only time that the secondary demon kings in hell were replaced on a large scale. At the same time, it made the other demons understand how big the difference between a secondary demon king and a great demon king was. In hell, no demon dared to disrespect a great demon king. Even a secondary demon king would tremble in fear when facing a great demon king. The dignity of a great demon king wouldn't allow any low-rank demon to offend him. Who's not here? Just then, Lang suddenly looked into the distance. An unfamiliar aura. Is it Lord Alpha's new vassal? Chapter 2600. Of the 36 great demon lords present, Kalang had the sharpest senses. He sensed that, at the edge of the black scarlet land, there was a powerful aura approaching them at an astonishing speed. That aura was very unfamiliar, but also very powerful. Suddenly, Kalang's expression changed. That's not one of us. I can feel his murderous intent. He's coming for one of us. The expressions of the great lords were very strange. Who among them was he coming for? Since he was coming for one of the great lords, then they must know what was going on here. And he was still coming towards them. Was he courting death? Admittedly, the owner of that aura was very powerful, but there were so many great lords present. None of them were easy to deal with. Judging from the other party's aura, the other party should be about the same as the top experts among them. However, if the other party were to come here alone to cause trouble, it would mean that he was looking down on the group of overlords. I'll share the other party's aura with you. See for yourselves who knows this guy. Kalang said. At this moment, all of the great lords sensed this aura. Suddenly, Shane Kazlak stood up from the stone chair. A fierce light burst out of his eyes. He remembered this aura. Even if he turned to ashes, he would remember it. Shane Kazlak raised the scarlet token high up. I want all of you to attack with all your might and bring that guy to me, dead or alive. Although no one submitted to Shane Kazlak, but no one dared to disobey the scarlet token in Shane Kazlak's hand. Kalang glanced at Shane Kazlak and said, I can't use half of my power here. Shane Kazlak snorted coldly. How could he believe Kalang's words? Kalang was his old enemy. They had fought no less than 1,000 times in 10,000 years. So he knew Kalang's strength like the back of his hand. Within the range of the volcano of despair, Kalang's strength would indeed be affected. However, it was only a small impact. At their level, the environment had very little influence on them, unable to use half of their strength. Obviously, Kalang didn't want to help him. Previously, Kalang was the first to notice the other party's arrival. That was because he didn't know who the other party was targeting. But after seeing Shane Kazlak's reaction, everyone knew that they were here for Shane Kazlak. Meanwhile, the other party definitely didn't know that so many great lords were here. They only knew that Shane Kazlak was here. At this moment, a great lord whose entire body radiated a multicolored glow said, The other party is very fast. This greater demon overlord was called the Divine Sense Spirit. It wasn't in a physical form, but a pure spiritual body. Although he could not detect the aura at the edge of the Black Barren Land like Coltrane did. However, within a certain range, he was able to sense all of the other party's movements. Faster than me, a great lord with a smooth, 3-meter-tall body asked confidently. He was a wind spirit, a creature born from the wind. He was born with the power of the wind. No one at the same level could surpass him in terms of speed. Let me create some trouble for him. Wind Spirit raised his arm. For a moment, the clouds in the sky surged. Chun Zhao could already see the super volcano hundreds of kilometers away. Without a doubt, the greater demon overlord's nest was that super volcano. However, the volcano was really frighteningly big. Too big. Even from hundreds of kilometers away, he could still see the outline of the volcano. Moreover, there wasn't just one aura there. Other than the familiar Shane Kazlak, there were a few other mixed auras. There was more than one greater demon overlord there. Chun Zhao's expression changed. Should he retreat now? Chun Zhao thought about it. If he retreated now, he'd lose a lot of face. He'd traveled thousands of kilometers to hell, a world away. In the end, he'd run away without even seeing Shane. This was too embarrassing. Chun Zhao thought for half a minute. He finally made up his mind. He was indifferent to life and death. If he wasn't happy, he'd fight. Of course, Chun Zhao didn't know that there weren't just a few, but dozens of greater demon overlords in the volcano of despair. If Chun Zhao knew, he'd definitely turn around and leave. Even so, Chun Zhao didn't plan on charging right at them. Chun Zhao suddenly turned and flew into the sky. Huh? He sensed us. Kolang frowned. He seems to be flying high into the sky. His escape route is really strange. The greater demon lords didn't plan on intercepting him. For one, the distance was too far, and the opponent was a speed type. At this distance, they couldn't catch up at all. Even Wind Spirit, who was most confident in speed, couldn't. Moreover, the opponent was at the same level as them. If they couldn't surround him, they couldn't do anything if he wanted to escape. So, instead of doing that, they might as well save some effort. A strange look flashed across Kolang's eyes. He sensed that the owner of the aura seemed to be flying higher into the sky. He wanted to go outside the void. Could it be that he was panicking and didn't know where he was going? After all, even greater demon lords of their level couldn't adapt to outside the void. Why was he flying outside the void? Kolang was filled with confusion, but he was also wary. It was very unlikely that the opponent was crazy. If he wasn't, he must have some other plan. No matter what, he had to be on guard. Kolang's senses were very far away, but he couldn't sense the exact situation. The spirit of consciousness, on the other hand, had a limited range. As for the other greater demon overlords, their perception range was even more limited. Kolang glanced at Shane Kazlak but didn't remind him of the exact situation. At the same time, Chun Zhao realized that Hell's atmosphere was much thicker than Earth's. Even at a height of 100,000 meters, the air here was still very abundant. However, the cosmic radiation here was much stronger. Chun Zhao continued flying up. He wanted to see how thick Hell's atmosphere was. When they flew to a height of 300,000 meters, the thinness of the air here was equivalent to that of 30,000 meters on Earth. This was about the right place. Chun Zhao planned to use a meteor here. When he was on Demon Island, he'd used an incomplete meteor once. At that time, its power was equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. At this height, he didn't know what the effect would be if he smashed it with full weight. Chun Zhao was eager to try. He activated the third stage of the coalescence technique. Chapter 26:01. It took 50 minutes. Chun Zhao finally completed the meteorite. Then, he basically didn't need to do anything else. With the acceleration of gravity, the meteorite would have enough time to gain great kinetic energy before it hit the ground. Of course, Chun Zhao didn't just do nothing. Instead, he used all his strength to pull the meteorite down. This allowed the meteorite to gain more initial kinetic energy. Soon, Chun Zhao realized that he wasn't pulling the meteorite down anymore. Instead, he was being pressed down by the meteorite. The meteorite fell faster and faster. It was already heating up from the friction with the air. The speed of falling seemed to be beyond Chun Zhao's imagination. More accurately, it was out of Chun Zhao's control. What did it mean to fall from 300,000 meters in the sky? The potential energy from the acceleration of gravity was 1,000 times more destructive than something of the same mass falling from 30,000 meters. Plus, the power of Chun Zhao's small world had increased by 10 times. So, the meteorite's weight had also increased by more than 10 times. Chun Zhao cursed inwardly. He immediately used large amounts of gas to form a barrier around him. Chun Zhao wasn't sure if he could withstand such power if it hit the ground. But he had no way out now. Even if he wanted to give up, he couldn't stop. Colin stared at the sky. Suddenly, a meteorite appeared in everyone's vision. What's that? Colin pointed at the meteorite falling from the sky. It's that guy. He didn't escape. Shane Kazlak only saw a huge fireball, but he didn't sense the incoming danger. The fireball was indeed huge, but it wasn't enough to make him feel danger. He had the title of Lava Demon to begin with. His resistance to fire had also reached the extreme. After all, he could eat and drink in lava. Of course, his resistance to fire wasn't weak. So, he didn't care too much about the huge fireball. As for the other demon lords, they didn't care too much either. They were stronger than Shane Kazrak, not weaker. Similarly, no one would be afraid of a mere fireball, even if the fireball was ridiculously huge. Some greater demon overlords cast a defensive barrier on themselves. Some relied on their powerful physical bodies and didn't care about what was falling. Only Coltrane, who had no way of knowing what was falling from the sky. But it definitely wasn't a fireball. After all, he had been paying attention to Chun Zhao in the sky. Chun Zhao had only been in the sky for around 50 minutes, and he had created a fireball to entertain everyone. Stop joking. No one's brain is flooded with water. So, Colin silently used his strongest defense. However, he could not suppress the strong uneasiness in his heart. The falling speed of the fireball seemed to be a little unexpected. At this time, a greater demon overlord revealed a solemn expression. That spell seems very dangerous. No, that's not a fireball. We can't let it continue to fall. We have to stop it. Use the undying barrier. A greater fiend, overlord, raised an immortal barrier above the volcano. At this moment, the meteor touched the barrier of immortality amidst the rumbling thunder. Wow! The greater fiend, overlord, spat out a mouthful of blood. Quick! Meteor was even faster than the greater demon, overlord, and instantly fell into the lava pool. All the demon lords covered their eyes. Bang! A sun rose from the Black Land. Even millions of square kilometers away from the Black Land, one could still clearly see that extremely bright ball of light. The light could evaporate ordinary demons directly. Light was the first to be released, followed by a shockwave that began to spread in all directions with the volcano of despair as the center. With the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, it destroyed everything in its path as easily as crushing dry weeds. The first to be hit was naturally the volcano of despair. The peak was destroyed in an instant. Everything was gone in an instant. In the moment of the collision, Chun Zhao was the first to be hit. Chun Zhao's skin kept cracking and blood kept spurting out. Even though Chun Zhao was in his strongest state, even though he'd prepared everything beforehand. But now, Chun Zhao really felt like he was going to die. Under the huge impact, his body's functions were on the verge of collapse. Chun Zhao could not see anything. All his senses had been destroyed too. All that was left was soul-tearing pain. Just then, Chun Zhao felt the nirvana flame ignite in his body. He did not activate on his own. He was forced to activate the nirvana flame. This meant that Chun Zhao was really close to death. Only when he was close to death would he activate the nirvana flame on his own. This feeling was very special. It was Chun Zhao's first time in this state. The pain disappeared and was replaced by another feeling. His flesh, blood, nerves, skin, and organs were all redistributed and reassembled. Finally, the familiar feeling returned. Chun Zhao suddenly swung his fist and shattered the thing wrapped around him. Chun Zhao opened his eyes again and scanned around him. He realized that he was standing on a broken eggshell. Chun Zhao was speechless. Not only had he learned the phoenix's nirvana flame, but he'd also learned hatching. Chun Zhao knew clearly how long had passed. It should have been around a minute. This meant that Chun Zhao had used a minute to recover from his near-death state to his peak. No, this state was even better than his previous peak state. Chun Zhao glanced at the crater. The volcano of despair was gone. Instead, there was a super crater with a diameter of 3 kilometers. There were also the corpses of demons of various sizes around it. Chun Zhao realized that these corpses were all at the level of a great lord. However, there were still a few demons in the small world. They were not dead. Instead, they were heavily injured. These were all his spoils of war. Chun Zhao grinned. But just then, the ground not far in front of Chun Zhao protruded. A demon burrowed out. The demon did not seem to be injured. Then a white figure descended from the sky. Kolang looked at Chun Zhao. He'd sensed danger just now. Therefore, he decisively flew up into the sky, even though there was a similar impact in the sky. There was also the same impact in the sky, but the impact in the sky was clearly much weaker than on the ground. This also allowed Coltrane to escape death. Just then, a few more great demon lords appeared one after another. Perhaps because of this or that method, they didn't suffer any injuries, or they avoided the disaster with light injuries. Other than the heavily injured and dying lords, there were 8 great demon lords in total. These 8 greater demon overlords still had their full strength. By now, the 8 demon lords had surrounded Chun Zhao. Chapter 26:02. Chun Zhao looked around. Lava demon Shane Kazlak was among the 8 demon lords. Chun Zhao was surprised that Shane Kazlak was unharmed. At least apart from his arm being shattered, he wasn't hurt at all. All the demon lords stared at Chun Zhao in shock and anger. He looked around at the black, barren land that was like a plain. The original volcano of despair disappeared, and so did the original mountain range. They were the only ones left. Only them. This kind of terrifying lethality was completely beyond their imagination. Even though they were demon lords, the power to destroy a country in an instant still terrified them. 5 of the greater demon overlords were unharmed, while the other 3 had minor injuries. The other dozen greater demon overlords were already on the verge of death. Some of them were just corpses. As for the others, there was no sign of them. They had been killed by Chun Zhao's meteors without even a speck left. However, the remaining 8 great demon lords clearly had the same hatred for Chun Zhao. After all, if Chun Zhao escaped, he'd be a huge problem in the future. Chun Zhao didn't have to do anything else. All he had to do was shoot at their territory. Their territory would be like Shane Kazlak's, returning to the state before liberation. 8 great demon overlords. Chun Zhao narrowed his eyes. He didn't think that he could face 8 demon lords at the same time. He'd thought that if he used his killer move, he might be able to kill Shane Kazlak and the other demon lords. But he'd underestimated the number of demon lords gathered at the Volcano of Despair. He'd also underestimated their trump cards. The current situation was very disadvantageous to him. Absolute freeze. Colin attacked first. Instantly, Chun Zhao felt his limbs lose the ability to move. His body was sealed in a block of ice. Chun Zhao even felt that all the cells in his body had lost the ability to move. Colin used his killer move right away. He had to use his full strength now. He'd hidden the truth just now. He'd been monitoring Chun Zhao, but hadn't told his companions. If the Lord Alpha were to find out about this, then he'd definitely die without a whole corpse. So he had to use his full strength now. He could show his attitude and lower his companions' suspicions. Chun Zhao panicked. They were indeed terrifyingly strong. No greater demon overlord could be underestimated. Chun Zhao's eyes widened. The flames of Nirvana. As Nirvana flames burned on Chun Zhao's body, Nirvana flames also burned on the outside, burning the ice inside and outside at the same time. The greatest power of this absolute ice seal did not lie in its low temperature, but in its ability to cause a living being's bodily functions to lose their vitality in an extremely short period of time. However, the Nirvana's flame instantly activated the frozen cells. Chun Zhao quickly regained his mobility and smashed the ice with a punch. Chun Zhao pounced at Kalang. At this moment, Enfant Nelly launched his attack. Roar! A terrifying sound wave swept toward Chun Zhao. Instantly, Chun Zhao felt dizzy. Blood spurted out of his mouth, nose, and ears. The sound wave left a trench thousands of meters long on the ground. The ditch was as smooth as a mirror. Chun Zhao's skin was being torn apart by the sound wave. Chun Zhao tried his best to stay awake. At the same time, he created hundreds of black balls in the shortest time possible. Go! Bang, bang, bang. The black ball hit Enfant Nelly's body. Enduring the pain, Enfant Nelly temporarily stopped his sonic attack. However, the damage the black ball could do to Enfant Nelly was extremely limited. The wounds on Chun Zhao's body were also healing quickly. Just then, Chun Zhao felt an unbearably hot pain from his back. Looking back, he saw Shane Kazlak stabbing at him with a huge flaming sword. Chun Zhao immediately dodged Shane's attack. At the same time, he punched the flaming sword away. Just as he was about to punch again, a figure blocked Chun Zhao's way. It was a greater demon lord with muscles all over its body. His limbs were thick, and the bulging veins on his skin looked like old tree roots. The demon lord blocked Chun Zhao's fist with his arms. Although he managed to block Chun Zhao's punch, his feet still skidded hundreds of meters on the ground. Chun Zhao was surprised that someone could actually block his punch. However, the muscular demon greater lord was similarly shocked. Such terrifying strength. He'd actually lost to Chun Zhao in his area of expertise. Just then, an arrow shot toward Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao actually couldn't dodge the attack. In fact, he didn't even notice the attack before he was hit. From the corner of his eyes, Chun Zhao glanced at a tall and slender demon lord not far away. The demon lord's movements were quick and sharp. He held a curved bow in his hand. The arrow he shot didn't have any trajectory or aura. Chun Zhao could only determine the arrow's trajectory based on the direction the demon lord pulled the bow. However, when Chun Zhao dodged again, he found himself hit by another arrow. Troublesome, really troublesome. None of the 8 demon lords were easy to deal with. Moreover, the 8 demon lords had teamed up. This made Chun Zhao suffer even more. He couldn't continue like this. He had to end the battle quickly or think of a way to escape. Now, the 8 demon lords didn't continue chasing. Instead, they repositioned themselves. They clearly planned to slowly exhaust Chun Zhao to death. This was a very good tactic. This could prevent Chun Zhao from fighting them to the death. Right now, Chun Zhao also needed to regroup. The enemy's temporary retreat gave him a chance to catch his breath. Suddenly, Chun Zhao realized that there were still remnants of the demon lord's power in the air. The owners of this power were all the demon lords that Chun Zhao had killed earlier. They hadn't completely dispersed. Instead, they lingered nearby. Chun Zhao realized that his small world could absorb this power much more easily than before. Glancing at the 8 demon lords, Chun Zhao absorbed the power without batting an eyelid. After a short period of recuperation, the 8 greater demon overlords attacked once more. However, this time, Chun Zhao wasn't in a hurry to succeed. Instead, he focused all his attention on dodging their attacks. The saying that a prolonged defense would lead to a loss was also useful for Chun Zhao. Before long, Chun Zhao was hit consecutively. However, Chun Zhao didn't fight back because of this. Instead, he patiently stalled for time. These attacks weren't weak, but they weren't fatal. Chun Zhao needed time to absorb the remaining power of the demon lords in the air. His small world was growing silently. The 8 demon lords didn't notice anything different. They were still working together to attack Chun Zhao. 9 Heaven's Divine Emperor. Chapter 26:03. Right now, Chun Zhao looked like a cornered beast. Chun Zhao could dodge one attack from the 8 demon lords, but he couldn't dodge the other one. Plus, he'd used the life force he'd used to put himself on the brink of death with Meteor. In this battle, he'd use at least 1/10 of his total life force. One had to admit that the 8 demon lord strategy was very effective. They didn't need to use much energy at all. They could just trap Chun Zhao here until he died. The process was slightly longer, but they had time. At the moment, Chun Zhao was even calmer than them. The enormous power was evaporating in the air. Chun Zhao couldn't stop it. However, he needed to use time to absorb it. The power was the best nutrient. He didn't even have to break it down. Chun Zhao could let the small world absorb the power faster and more easily. Then, it would turn into nutrients for the small world. Finally, all the power dissipating in the air was absorbed by Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao felt that his small world had tripled from its current foundation. What did tripling mean? It was about 30 times stronger than his original state. The diameter of the small world had reached 1,500 meters. It was time to counterattack. In an instant, Chun Zhao condensed tens of thousands of black balls in the small world. All of the greater demon lords were stunned. The next moment, tens of thousands of black balls shot toward the 8 demon lords from all directions. After all, not every greater demon overlord had powerful defenses. The tens of thousands of black balls were terrifyingly destructive. Chun Zhao even felt that the small world's power surpassed his own. Moreover, Chun Zhao's attacks were limited. However, the small world attacks were freer and more convenient. The 8 demon lords hurriedly put up their magic shields or dodged Chun Zhao's attacks. Although the number of black balls was shocking, their individual attacks were still limited. They were all targeting the demon lords. So, the effect was still limited. It could hurt some of them, but would only hurt them. It couldn't even hurt them heavily. However, the greatest use of this move wasn't to injure or kill the demon lords. If they were really so easy to kill, then Chun Zhao wouldn't have been in such a sorry state earlier. Chun Zhao's goal was only to stop their attacks and disrupt their formation. A white dwarf 10,000 times bigger than a normal black ball condensed around Chun Zhao. 2, 3, a total of 8 white dwarfs. With a wave of his hand, 8 white dwarfs shot toward the 8 demon lords. What followed was a terrifying explosion. At the same time, Chun Zhao also moved. He turned into a beam of white light and went straight for Shane Kazlak. Shane Kazlak had just used his flaming greatsword to cut open the white dwarf. The impact of the white dwarf also covered Shane Kazlak in an instant. The terrifying impact almost tore Shane Kazlak's skin apart. The next moment, Chun Zhao appeared before Shane Kazlak. Chun Zhao was too fast, so fast that Shane Kazlak couldn't defend in time. Chun Zhao grabbed Shane Kazlak's flaming sword. Clang! Chun Zhao broke the flaming sword. Chun Zhao raised the broken blade of the flaming greatsword and slashed at Shane Kazlak. Crash! Before the blade could touch Shane Kazlak, his body suddenly turned into magma. Huge waves surged toward Chun Zhao. By then, the other demon lords had already dealt with their own problems and all reached out to help. Chun Zhao could only retreat for now, sighing inwardly. As expected, none of the demon lords were easy to deal with. It was almost impossible to catch them off guard and kill any one of them in the shortest amount of time. Just then, Chun Zhao suddenly remembered that his dark magma had merged with magma before. He wondered if Shane Kazlak's magma could absorb it. The thought only flashed through his mind before Chun Zhao made a decision. In an instant, the dark magma directly covered the magma that Shane Kazlak had transformed into. 3 arrows shot toward him from behind. Chun Zhao didn't even look back, allowing them to hit him. Damn it, what is this? Shane Kazlak panicked. Shane Kazlak could feel his body dissolving bit by bit. He felt as if someone had stuffed him into a stomach bag. Actually, his feeling wasn't wrong. Chun Zhao had a lot of experience in devouring enemies, especially after his bloodline had completely merged. The dark magma also had the abilities of a glutton. In the past, the dark magma had devoured a lot of dark and depraved powers, so it was mostly black. But now, the dark magma started turning from speckles of red to a large area of red. Originally, it was mainly of the dark element, but after devouring Shane Kazlak, it started turning into the fire element. Chun Zhao directly put the dark magma back into his body. What flowed under his skin had turned into magma. Chun Zhao also realized that this new power in his body was especially compatible with the Nirvana flames. Absolute freeze. While Chun Zhao was still standing, Colin gave Chun Zhao an absolute freeze from behind. But this time, although Chun Zhao was frozen, he wasn't frozen like the first time. Chun Zhao moved his limbs and casually shattered the absolute freeze with a punch. Colin's expression changed because he felt the scorching aura from Chun Zhao's body. It was the aura he hated the most, just like Shane Kazlak's. Just then, Chun Zhao felt danger. The archer had inadvertently set up a magic array. Chun Zhao wasn't unfamiliar with this. Seal. Without thinking, Chun Zhao turned into a stream of light. Back then, when he'd faced Leviathan Aberrantigimus, he'd almost sealed Chun Zhao as a mere lord of the demons. If it was this time, there were so many lords. Once the seal was activated, Chun Zhao wouldn't have any chance to turn the tables. So, Chun Zhao definitely wouldn't give them the chance. Stop him. Hurry. Don't let him leave my magic array. The bow-wielding great lord bellowed. The strength-type demon lord stood in front of Chun Zhao. Don't even think about going anywhere. The strength-type demon lord roared, lowering his fists. But this time, Chun Zhao didn't choose to fight head-on. Instead, he took out the black trident the moment the strength-type demon lord came into contact with him. The strength-type demon lord raised his fist and smashed it at Chun Zhao. He clearly didn't realize that danger was approaching. Chun Zhao directly stabbed the black trident into the body of the strength-type demon lord. The demon lord's eyes widened, and he stared at the black trident in his chest in shock. Before he could react, Chun Zhao had already punched and crushed his head. He grabbed the body of the strength-type demon lord and stuffed it into his spatial ring. The remaining 6 demon lords were all enraged. Chapter 26:04. They didn't understand how Chun had done it. He had killed a greater demon lord in an instant, but this made them feel a strong sense of danger. Chun didn't plan to stay any longer, even though he had devoured Shane Kazlak through the dark lava. Moreover, Shifeng had caught the demon lord off guard and killed the demon lord. But there were still 6 greater demon lords here. Every one of them was terrifyingly powerful. He could kill 2 in a row, but that didn't mean he still had a chance. Plus, if he continued to stay, he might not even be able to kill a single one. Instead, he would be killed. If it was a one-on-one, Chun was confident that he could kill any one of them, but they wouldn't give him such a chance. Even with the black trident, it would be difficult for Chun to have the same opportunity. The black trident would make them wary, but at the same time, it would make them greedy. Chun wouldn't give them such a chance. Chun glanced at his surroundings. The small world swept up the heavily injured and the corpses of the greater demon lords and ran away without any warning. The remaining 6 greater demon overlords looked at each other in confusion. None of them chased after Chun. After thinking for a while, they realized that it wasn't Chun who had killed the greater demon lord in an instant. It was the black trident in Chen's hand. That thing was indeed a supreme treasure, but it would probably be a death sentence. Plus, Chen wasn't a kind person. He would wait for them to kill him. This was an enemy even more ferocious than they were. None of them had the confidence to kill Chen. Plus, they didn't trust each other enough. Actually, if they had been willing to give up everything and cooperate with Chen wouldn't have been able to escape now. It was because they were wary and suspicious of each other. That was why Chen had the chance to counterattack and even break through their alliance. Chen didn't swagger away. Instead, he hid his aura and headed toward Obsidian City. This place was very far from Obsidian City. Along the way, Chen first killed the few dying demons and stored their corpses in his spatial ring. Otherwise, it wouldn't be convenient. After flying for a full 4 hours, Chen finally approached Obsidian City. Just then, he saw a huge figure appear in the distance. Chen immediately returned from his energy form to his physical form. Iris. Chen, it's you? Iris thought that it was an enemy. She could only sense a terrifying aura approaching, but she was unable to identify the other party. Now, she and Beelzebub Zophi were already frightened by the mere twang of a bow. Although they had just won a match not too long ago, they occupied the territories of the three-headed devil and the red eagle, as well as a large amount of resources. But this also caused the wrath of their enemy, King Alpha. Although the two of them were considered to be at the peak of the greater demon overlords, they were still inferior to the demon overlords. But it was impossible to resist the Alpha Demon King. The 30-plus greater demon overlords under him could easily slaughter them. Iris, let me rest in the castle for a while, Chen said. Although he was in a good state now, the previous high-intensity battle still made his mind tense, and his body was not very comfortable. Iris nodded. Get on my back. Iris brought Chen into Obsidian Castle. Who summoned you? You seem to have just been through a battle. Where's Zophi? Some unfamiliar demons are approaching the border of our territory, Iris said. Zophi went to check the situation. She was the only one guarding Obsidian Castle now. This was why she was so nervous earlier. What's wrong with you? Chen took out his spoils of war, the corpses of greater demon overlords. Big ones, small ones, all of different shapes. Iris was shocked and took 2 steps back. Her eyes were filled with horror. I came to hell to find a greater demon overlord to solve some personal problems, but I accidentally barged into their gathering. After a fight, I killed a few and escaped. This is Shane Kazlak's Balrog's sword. This is the helmet of the dead. It's from the Nether Tower. This is Morgate's head. How many greater demon overlords did you kill? I don't know the exact number, but my victory was very unexpected. In fact, they gathered together and didn't stop me from releasing my ultimate skill. That's why I succeeded. Chen was very sure that if they had stopped him from releasing his ultimate skill, the best outcome would have been for Chen to run away with his tail between his legs. Suddenly, Iris picked up a red token. Her expression changed drastically again. This is Demon King Alpha's Crimson Token. Iris thought that she had already seen a lot of things, but at this moment, she really felt a chill. It could be said that she had watched Chen grow up step by step. She had never thought that one day, Chen would grow to where he was today. Perhaps Chen wasn't powerful enough for her to look up to, but Chen's results were definitely enough to shock her. What's this thing for? Wait, I'll tell Zophi to come back, Iris said solemnly. When Zophi discovered the signal sent by Iris, he thought that there was an enemy invasion in his territory. After all, he and Iris had agreed to use the signal only if there was a catastrophic problem in his territory. However, when Zophi returned, he found that Obsidian City was peaceful. There didn't seem to be any signs of war. Moreover, Iris's aura didn't seem to be in any danger. Beelzebub Zophi returned to Obsidian Castle. He immediately noticed that Chen was beside Iris. Chen, why are you here? Zophi, take a look at this. Iris handed the crimson token to Beelzebub Zophi. In an instant, Beelzebub Zophi's eyes were filled with shock and doubt. What the hell is going on? My spoils of war are one of them. I want to know what exactly happened. The more details, the better. Jen told Iris and Beelzebub Zophi everything that had happened. Apart from hiding the identity of the handsome guy who had summoned him and some details of the battle, he didn't hide anything else. However, after Beelzebub Zophie and Iris heard Chen's statement, their expressions froze. You're saying that you killed nearly 30 greater demon lords? Actually, there were only 2 who were truly killed. Chapter 26:05. Chen Zhao was confident, but he wasn't arrogant yet. Although Shifeng had killed nearly 30 greater demon overlords, the demon overlords were still far stronger than the demon overlords. But in reality, he'd only killed 2 in a head-on battle. Meteorite was his trump card, but it wasn't his true combat power. Moreover, the requirements to use Meteorite were too strict. Beelzebub Zophie played with a red token, even though he was just listening to Chen Zhao's description. Both the husband and wife were shaken to the core. It was hard to imagine that he'd fought 8 demon lords. Not only that, but he also killed 2 of them and escaped safely with the spoils of war. How difficult would it be? I have use for this red token, Zophie said. I'll use the wealth of almost 30 demon lords to exchange for it. Wait, are you mistaken? I killed those greater demon overlords, and you're using their wealth to exchange for my spoils of war? You killed them, but how are you going to get their wealth? You can't even find their territory, let alone their wealth. Their wealth won't automatically become yours just because you killed their master, but I can. What's this red token for? Chen Zhao asked. Using the wealth of 30 demon lords to exchange for this red token. This could only mean that the value of this crimson token was much higher than the wealth of 30 greater demon overlords. So, Chen Zhao was very curious about the value of this token. This is the token of the secondary demon king I'm going to deal with. It also contains his power. As long as I have this token, his subordinates won't be able to attack me unless I attack them first. And the secondary demon king isn't allowed to attack you directly, so you'll be undefeatable, right? Chen Zhao immediately understood Zophie's intentions. Not only that, I can also study that secondary demon king's power. I can even absorb it and find a better way to counter him. Zophie had to admit that Chen Zhao had given him too many surprises. How difficult would it be to defeat and replace a secondary demon king? That was almost impossible to succeed. Perhaps Zophie's subconscious thought was that he couldn't succeed. He thought that he couldn't succeed. Ambition had driven him to this step, but it didn't mean that he believed he could do it. He was not the first demon lord to attempt to replace the lesser demon king. However, in the past tens of thousands of years, only one greater demon overlord had successfully become a lesser demon king. Beelzebub Zophie even felt that he was just one of the many losers who kept failing. He had even made up his mind. But Chen Zhao had given him hope of turning the tables. Before he could face the lesser demon king, there was still an insurmountable mountain. They were the 30 or so greater demon overlords under the lesser demon king. As long as these 30-plus greater demon overlords existed, the demon overlords would not be able to escape. Then he would never be able to face the lesser demon king. It seemed that the situation he was facing was despair. There was no way he could fight against the alliance of more than 30 greater demon lords. Unless these 30-plus greater demon overlords were willing to send them off one by one. Was that even possible? Impossible. No one was a fool. However, Chen Zhao's appearance this time had directly destroyed the alliance of more than 30 demon lords under the secondary demon king's command. Moreover, he even brought him a crimson token. This red token turned Beelzebub Zophie from a passive situation to an active one. Due to the restrictions of the rules, the lesser demon king could not directly attack Beelzebub Zophie. Moreover, because of Chen Zhao's massacre, only a single digit remained of the 30 greater demon lords. This greatly weakened the lesser demon king's power. The level of a lesser demon king's power was related to the number of greater demon lords under him. Moreover, the remaining greater demon lords could not directly attack Beelzebub Zophie with the crimson token. This meant that as long as Beelzebub Zophie was willing, he could choose to attack at any time. Of course, the crimson token could only maintain a situation where he would not be defeated. It was not a hope of victory. He had to face a lesser demon king. A crimson token was far from being able to change the outcome. Of course, even so, it was still enough to make Beelzebub Zophie excited. "Oh, your alchemist subordinate already has results. I was going to summon you a few days ago, but you came yourself. Take me to see his results." Felt Nitake knew about Chun Zhao's arrival. At the entrance of his alchemy lab, he waited respectfully for Chun Zhao's arrival. When he saw Chun Zhao, he walked quickly and knelt on one knee to welcome Chun Zhao. "Great master, thank you for coming." If a normal person spoke to Chun Zhao like this and knelt on one knee, Chun Zhao would only think that there was something wrong with this person. However, this was hell, and Felt Nitake was a demon. Everything was as it should be. "I heard that you've already made the magic potion I needed." "Yes, I've completed the divine power potion. Please forgive me for naming it on my own." "Divine power potion? Does it really have such an effect?" "Please follow me." Felt Nitake brought Chun Zhao into the lab. There was a crystal container with a diameter of 2 meters and a height of 3 meters. The crystal container was filled with colorful liquid, like melted glass, slowly flowing in the container. The colors were so bright that Chun Zhao was dazzled. "Don't tell me this is the divine power potion you were talking about." "Yes, master. This is the divine power potion." "How do I drink it? How much does it work?" "Master, it's actually not for drinking," Felt Nitake said. "It's for soaking. Soak your body in the divine power potion and let the power contained in the potion seep into your body," said Felt Nitake. "How much can increase my power?" "Master, this divine power potion can increase your power." "Are you kidding me?" "Master, the divine power potion's true function is to improve your power, starting from the most basic power to the most advanced strengthening spell you've mastered. If you can use all your power perfectly, this divine power potion will be useless to you. If there's even the slightest flaw in your power magic system, the divine power potion will help you understand and perfect it." Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 26:06. Just soak it. You just need to soak it. Of course, you can also drink it, but it doesn't taste very good. Moreover, it can be used repeatedly after a certain period of time. If you drink it, it can only be used once. "Can I take it away directly?" Chun Zhao asked. Of course. In fact, Fate Nitak had created this container for the sake of beauty and convenience. Other than making the divine power potion, Chun Zhao had to be perfect in other aspects. After taking the divine power potion, Chun Zhao bid farewell to Beelzebub Zophie and Iris. His time in hell had come to an end. Chun Zhao also brought some local specialties from hell back. When he returned to the human world, Chun Zhao received a call from Alex. "Chun, where have you been these past 2 days? You weren't in the service area when I called you. I called Fei Lai, and she said you had something urgent, but she didn't tell me where you went. I thought you were kidnapped." Before going to hell, Chun Zhao had only told Fei Lai. Chun Zhao was about to explain when Alex interrupted him. But Alex interrupted him again. "Forget it. But even if you're kidnapped, please let the kidnappers go or deal with it yourself. I have too many things on my hands right now. I don't have time to deal with such a small matter." Chun Zhao nodded. "Is it a small matter to you that I was kidnapped? Everyone's time is precious. Are you willing to spend it on kidnappers? Or use it to make money?" "Fine. Compared to money, kidnapping is indeed a small matter." Chun Zhao shrugged. "Why are you looking for me?" "It's about the contract between you and Ms. Jane Fankel. We've mostly settled it. Now, we just need your signature." "What time?" "It's best if it's now." "Now? Don't you want to reschedule?" "I've already said that my time is precious. Your time is precious as well. Her time is just as precious." "Fine. Now, give me the address. Drive a good car to pick me up. I'll go with you." "Oh, you have to change." Chun Zhao returned home. After changing, he drove a luxury car. Chun Zhao didn't really like driving his new Rolls-Royce Phantom. However, this car was indeed very suitable for decoration. Compared to a flashy supercar, a sedan was more suitable for a formal occasion. He got in the latest Rolls-Royce Phantom not long ago. It was a gift from Amira. When Chun Zhao arrived at Alex's law firm, she even found one of her subordinates to be their driver for the time being. In Alex's words, people of their status needed a full-time chauffeur. Especially in formal occasions, the status of those who drove themselves would drop by a notch. This had nothing to do with wealth, but a matter of style. Chun Zhao didn't mind, but he still respected Alex's suggestion. Sitting in the back seat, Alex handed him a document. This is Madame Jane Fankel's message. Take a look. Is she only 45? Chun Zhao asked, confused. He had thought that Lady Jane, her uncle, would be a little older than him. Yes, is there a problem? Didn't you say that when she was in the 90s, she launched the biggest merger of the last century? At that time, she was not even 20 years old, right? To be precise, she's 19. Chun Zhao gasped. 19? What was he still doing? Spending all night in internet cafes with his roommates. She was already a force to be reckoned with in the financial market. She was the youngest recipient of a master's degree from Yale University's Department of Finance. At the age of 16, she began to get involved in the family business. At the age of 18, she officially took over the Caribbean Empire Cruise Line. At the age of 19, she reached the most glorious moment of her career. Although nothing similar happened in the following 20 years, the Caribbean Empire Cruise Line successfully became the world's #1 cruise line in her hands. The car drove into a luxurious manor. Along the way, there were many well-equipped men in black. This doesn't look like a rich manor. It looks more like a mafia family's nest, right? Alex seemed to know what Chun Zhao was going to say. What's her background? The Marx family, from Italy. Almost all the information about her that's circulated around the world has concealed her surname. Her full name should be Jane Fankel Marx. After the car stopped, a man in black walked up to open the door for Chun Zhao. Are you sure that Madame Jane, our uncle, won't resort to other means to sign an unfair contract with us? It's an era where capital rules. If she still does business the way her family did in the past, she wouldn't have been able to develop Caribbean Empire Cruise Line to its current scale. Alex had interacted with all kinds of people, so she knew this very well. Every industry had its own rules. It seemed like the mafia was very scary. However, if they tried to clear their names, they would follow the rules more than others once they chose to enter a certain industry. Because they needed to clear their names, they couldn't use the same methods as before. This was their choice. Chun Zhao finally met Jane Fankel. Perhaps it was because of her meticulous makeup and matching of her clothes. Jane Fankel looked younger than in her photos. Hello, Mr. Chun. Jane Fankel extended her hand with a smile. Hello, Miss Fankel. Welcome. Please come in. The two entered the living room with Jane Fankel's invitation. It looked like a scene from The Godfather that Chun Zhao had seen before. It had a very European style of decoration and solid wood furniture. After the two sat down, Alex spoke. Ms. Fankel, shall we go straight to the topic? Of course, Mr. Chun. Is that okay? Jane Fankel nodded, but then she looked at Chun Zhao. Meeting Jane Fankel's gaze, Chun Zhao said, My history is more like winning the lottery. I don't know anything about finance, so I leave most of my business to professionals. Alex is one of the most professional people. Of course, we all know how smart and capable Alex is, but this also has to do with Mr. Chen's trust. You flatter me, Chun Zhao said, smiling. Jane Fankel waved her finger behind her. One of her subordinates passed a bound document to Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao, on the other hand, pushed it in front of Alex. Divine King of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 26:07. It wasn't Alex's first time reading a contract. However, she still read it very seriously. However, after looking at it for a moment, Alex frowned. Ms. Fankel, did you take the wrong contract? Stunned, Jane Fankel asked, What's wrong? This contract is different from what we agreed on. It's also not the source document I saw the other day. Jane Fankel furrowed her brows. Help me point out what's different. Take a look. Here, and these 3 places. If my boss signs this contract, then my boss won't be selling the shares to you. He'll be giving you the shares and paying you $2 billion. Alex's expression was also very ugly. After all, she just promised that the other party wouldn't be so unruly. In the blink of an eye, she'd encountered such an unruly situation. After Jane Fankel made sure the contract wasn't the same as the one she had read before, her face turned pale. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Chun, Ms. Alex. This is due to my negligence. I took the wrong contract. I'll give the original contract to Mr. Chun as soon as possible. At the same time, we'll increase the price by 5%. What do you think, Mr. Chun?" Chen Zhao looked at Alex to see what her plan was. "All right then, but I hope there won't be such a mistake next time." Chen Zhao and Alex stood up and prepared to leave. But just then, the black-clothed man at the door crossed his arms and blocked Alex and Chen Zhao's way. Chen Zhao turned around and looked at Jane Fankel. "Ms. Fankel, can you explain what this means?" Jane Fankel's shocked face was also tinged with anger. "AMU, Tansk, what are you doing?" Just then, AMU, who had slicked back hair, said, "Miss, we're now under Mr. Caesar's orders." "Sorry. Caesar? You're under him? What can he give you?" Jane Fankel was both shocked and furious. Caesar? Her useless brother? If he was even a little bit capable, he wouldn't have made her his heir. Mr. Max agreed yesterday that Mr. Caesar will be his successor, and at the same time, he will hand over all power to Mr. Caesar. In other words, from then on, all of us will automatically be loyal to Mr. Caesar. Impossible. How could father make such a decision? Jan Fankel's face was filled with disbelief. By now, Chun Zhao was getting impatient. He looked at Jane Fankel. "I don't care about your family ethics. We just want to get out of here." "I'm sorry, Mr. Chun. First, you need to sign this contract before you can leave." The lawyer who had been standing behind Jane Fankel suddenly spoke. "What if I don't?" Chun Zhao asked calmly. "Then I'm afraid you won't be able to leave here today." Just then, AMU and Tansk pointed their guns at the back of Chun Zhao's head. Chun Zhao glanced at Alex from the corner of his eye. She nodded secretly. The two of them seemed to be communicating something. "What?" Chun Zhao sneered. "Pointing a gun at your partner's head is how you cooperate?" Jane Fankel was trembling with rage. She had been in the industry for almost 30 years. She had never been humiliated like this before. But this time, she didn't even have a chance to retort. She wasn't angry at Chun Zhao's accusations and humiliation. She was angry at her own brother for doing such a despicable thing. If today's incident got out, then she and the business empire that she had built would be destroyed in a day. The bigger a company was, the more they cared about their reputation. Pointing a gun at someone's head and forcing them to sign a contract? This was unforgivable at any time. What would the regular tourists think? What would the shareholders of the company think? "Chandler, did you change the contract too?" "Boss, I'm sorry," Chandler said calmly. "Mr. Max also arranged for me to stay with you." Chen Zhao looked at Alex. "Is that enough?" "Yes." Alex took out a portable recorder. "That's enough to prove that you were acting in self-defense." AMU and Tansk suddenly realized that Chun Zhao had disappeared before them. The next moment, AMU felt a heavy kick on his back. Then he flew into the air. He didn't die, but Chun Zhao had broken his spine. Lying on the ground, his body was twisted. His upper body kept struggling, but his lower body didn't move at all. Startled, Tansk suddenly raised his gun and turned. But before he could aim at Chun Zhao had already broken Tansk's wrist with one hand. Then he pointed the gun at Tansk's shoulder. Bang, bang, bang. Alex closed her eyes and turned around. "Please don't make it too bloody. The suit I'm wearing costs $30,000. Chun Zhao didn't make it too bloody. He didn't even kill anyone. After all, his suit was expensive too. It was inconvenient to move around in a suit. Casual clothes were more comfortable. Ms. Fankel, you've ruined my rare chance to wear a suit." At this moment, the men in black who were scattered around the manor ran over after hearing the gunshots. Jane Fankel walked to the door with a furious expression. "Put away your guns. Mr. Chun, I'll give you an explanation." Jane Fankel didn't have the face to talk about cooperation anymore. If she couldn't give Chun Zhao a satisfactory answer, their family's huge business empire would also sink into oblivion. Jane Fankel stood at the door and looked at the men in black who hadn't put down their guns. "You better know what you're doing. If you put down your guns now, I'll pretend this never happened. But if you reject my good intentions, you better think about your wives and children." Jane Fankel was born in a mafia family. Her father was a godfather. She'd been influenced by some things since she was young. She wasn't a white lotus. She'd seen more bloodshed than even a soldier who'd been to the battlefield. What my father and brother can give you, I can also give you, and more. Jane Fankel had controlled the Caribbean Empire Cruise Line for more than 20 years. She was not someone who could be dismissed just because of the title of Godfather. If she wanted to, she could directly starve her family. This wasn't a joke. And this time, she wasn't joking either. She was really angry. Chapter 26:08. The men in black lowered their guns one after another. Once there was a first, there would be a second. Even these people would follow blindly. Some of them were Jane Fankel's trusted followers. Thus, they were the first to lower their guns. Mr. Chun, please give me 3 days. Sure. If you can give me a satisfactory answer in 3 days, we'll continue working together. Then, Chun Zhao and Alex drove away. In the car, Chun Zhao asked, Alex, do you think she directed it herself? Alex shook her head. She wouldn't gamble with her company's reputation. After a pause, Alex added, I thought you'd kill someone. I've always been a pacifist. Alex glanced at Chun Zhao in disdain. After returning home, Portia stayed at home to take care of the kids. However, Chun Zhao realized that his long-absent assistant, Zephyra, was also there. Zephyra, you're back? What did you come back? Boss, Zephyra greeted Chun Zhao with a smile. Zephyra, did you go on a mission the past few days? Portia was very curious about Zephyra's deeds. You definitely don't want to know the whole process. Zephyra still had a faint smile on her face. Did you kill someone? Zephyra hesitated. She glanced at Chun Zhao silently and then nodded. Wow, impressive. Portia's passion had been ignited. After all, she had a normal life and desired to live a life beyond that. Her mind automatically filled in the gaps of Zephyra's passionate life. No matter what kind of bloody storm Zephyr was facing outside, he did not care. Here, Zephyr was just an ordinary girl, hard-working and approachable. After lunch, Zephyr sat by the lake and dipped her bare feet into the water. Unlike the turbulent life outside, the life here made her feel peaceful and tranquil. Chun Zhao brought a glass of juice to Zephyra. Is it resolved? Zephyra hesitated for a moment and then shook her head. What's the situation this time? An extremely ferocious demonic dragon has massacred more than 10 human villages. He's extremely cunning. There's no pattern to the targets he chooses. He chooses them completely randomly, and they're very far away from each other. After he finishes massacring a village, he immediately leaves. My team members and I have been hunting him for a few months, and we've only encountered him once. Even if he has absolute strength, he won't come into direct contact with us. His footprints are all over the 5 continents. His actions should have angered the entire spirit world, right? This situation is no longer a dragon slayer's task. Are you willing to help? I really want to, but he didn't enter my territory, Chun Zhao said. In the spirit world, those who have the strength to do so all have the same thoughts as you. Only a few hot-headed spiritualists fantasized about the great cause of slaying dragons and gathered together to fight against the demonic dragon. They heavily injured the demonic dragon, while their entire army was annihilated. We, the dragon slayers, weren't able to make it in time for that battle. Chun Zhao could hear the complaint in Refer's voice. It seemed to be very dissatisfied with a master like Chun Zhao. He clearly had the ability to solve the problem, but he just stood by. Forget it. This is the last time I think that I've already quit the Dragon Slayers. If it's your request, I can help you once, Chun Zhao said. Refra lowered her head and thought for a long time. Are you really willing to help? Yes. Please help me destroy that demonic dragon. Sure. Tell me the demonic dragon's whereabouts. I'll pay close attention to it. As soon as I get accurate information, I'll tell you immediately. Okay. Also, can you bring me with you? I want to kill that demonic dragon with my own hands. Other than hatred and honor, is there any other reason? For us Dragon Slayers, there are some things that we can never erase, such as the Dragon Slayer mark. Refra lifted a dragon tattoo on her arm. It exuded the aura of the dragon race. It was very faint, but it was real. Every Dragon Slayer is actually a descendant of the dragon race. It's just that it's almost impossible for us to activate the dragon race's bloodline. However, we can temporarily borrow the power of the dragon race by bathing in dragon blood. Zephyr rolled down her sleeves. If the conditions allow, I can agree to it. Refra had quit the Dragon Slayer organization, but it wasn't difficult for her to obtain information about the Dragon Slayers. After all, a lot of information was shared among the Dragon Slayers. Even though she had left the Dragon Slayer organization, she could still obtain the corresponding information through her former companions. But I don't believe there's such a crazy dragon, Chun Zhao said. From his actions, he's an extremely calm dragon. He doesn't only know how to kill. Killing for the sake of killing isn't in line with human nature. Human nature didn't just refer to a person's personality. It was the nature of all intelligent races. If the other was a violent dragon who didn't know how to think, he might only kill to satisfy his desires. But he was a dragon who could escape from the dragon slayers and the entire spiritual world many times. He didn't seem like an idiot who did things recklessly. I think he definitely has his own goal, but he hasn't revealed it yet. We've suspected that he has other goals, but we haven't found out yet. Chen Zhao rubbed his chin and thought for a long time. His purpose in doing this is completely like the action of a lunatic. However, he is not a lunatic. His seemingly clueless actions might be because he has put his purpose out in the open, but it has been ignored by everyone. Zephyr frowned. On the surface, you mean his goal is to provoke the entire spiritual world? That's the only possibility I can think of. What's in it for him? Does he want to die? Maybe. I'm not a smart person either. These are just my guesses. Chun Zhao had limited information, so his guesses were also very limited. But he still believed that this wasn't an irrational killing. Chun Zhao still had the perspective of profit. The smarter a person was, the less they would do irrational things. If the other party was a giant dragon above the dragon clan, then he would definitely choose a more reliable method. If they wanted to overthrow the rule of the humans, it was far from enough to just rely on killing. At least, normal killing couldn't overthrow the rule of humans. Chapter 26:09. The Marx family originated from Sicily. They immigrated to the United States in the 1920s. Then, they took root here and made their first fortune by relying on the bloody accumulation of primitive blood. Prohibition in the United States gave them a chance to rise. In fact, most of the reason why the American Mafia was rampant today was because of the Prohibition. Most of the Mafia relied on Z's private alcoholic beverages to rise to power. In the era of Prohibition, it was also the era when the Mafia was at its most rampant. How rampant were they? They shot the judge in front of the court in broad daylight. The gunman was not punished. Instead, he sent a letter to the judge. He regarded it as a glorious achievement. If the current American politics was controlled by the capitalists, then the American political system was dominated by capitalists. In the past, the American politics was controlled by the Mafia, although the United States had cleaned up the chaos several times. Even today, the Mafia problem in the United States had not been solved, because the Mafia was deeply rooted in society. Of course, in the 1960s and 1970s, there were a group of clear-headed families. There were also a group of clear-headed families who knew that this path could not be walked to the end. These families worked hard to clean up their families. That was the case with the Marx family. It was under this situation that Jane Fankel's father took over the family. But he was limited by the vision and reputation of the previous generation. So, Jane Fankel's father did not achieve much. But he had laid a very good foundation for Jane Funkel. Jane Fankel was the representative of the Mafia descendants in the new era. Father, I want to know why. I've already brought the family out of the swamp, but your decision has plunged the family back into the swamp. If you can't give me a satisfactory answer, I might very well correct your mistake myself. Jane Fankel tried her best to speak calmly and slowly, but her suppressed anger and confusion could still be heard in her voice. Old Marx was silent for a while on the other end of the phone. Then he said in a deep voice, I am just correcting the mistakes of the past. Mistakes? What mistakes? We are the Mafia. We are born to walk in the dark, not fantasize about how to dance in the sun. Jan Fankel couldn't believe that her father would say such a thing. Back then, he stood his ground and led the family to give up those shameful businesses. Old Marks was dedicated to cleaning up the family's reputation. Why would he say such a thing? Do you know what you're talking about? Jan Fankel's face turned gloomy. Of course I know what I'm talking about, but what about you? Do you know who you're talking to? Or do you think you can talk to your father like this just because you've made some achievements? All right, I'm sorry, father. I was wrong. Jane Fankel's tone grew colder and colder. In the next instant, her tone changed, and she suddenly said, "This should be the last time I call you father. You want to sever ties with me? Who gave you the courage to make such a stupid decision? I don't want to sever ties with you. I want to sever ties with my family. Now, I want you to apologize immediately. Sorry, Mr. Marks. I refuse your request. Fankel, you've made a stupid decision." Old Max's tone turned cold. "No, you made a stupid decision. Looks like I need to let you know how stupid your decision is," Old Max said coldly. "Looks like we have a big disagreement. Then, our communication ends here." Jan Fankel hung up the phone and turned to a tall man with pain on his face. "Iyer, I'll leave the rest to you." They were now outside the headquarters of the Marks family. Behind Jan Fankel and Iyer was a group of fully armed mercenaries. Jan Fankel had spent a lot of money to hire them. Jan Fankel handed Iyer 2 photos. "These 2, I want you to ensure their safety." The 2 people in the photos were her father, Old Max, and her younger brother, Caesar Max. She planned to use her power to destroy the Marks family. She would play the role of the family gravedigger. At the same time, she would use her power to teach her father and her brother a lesson. What was the power of capital? In the face of the power of capital, all the glory and prestige of the family in the past would become worthless. There were about 100 people in this mercenary legion, and they were not just individually strong. They also had the most advanced weapons. Each of them was equipped with enough equipment to shoot at 30 enemies for 30 minutes. Iyer took the photos and glanced at them, revealing his white teeth. "I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee anything." There would always be some employer who would make a request before the war. However, Iyer would ignore most of the requests. Their mission was not to save people, but to kill. They were enemies. Before he could ensure that they put down their weapons, he would not agree to Jan Fankel's request. The mercenaries easily tore through the Marks family's defensive line. The people inside the Marks family could not even communicate with the outside world by phone. The mercenaries had already turned the place into a restricted area with interference devices. Jan Fankel looked at the once familiar home, which was now engulfed in the flames of war. She did not plan to kill her father and brother. She just wanted them to not be a hindrance. However, given her father and brother's way of doing things, they would never allow her to leave the family's control. That was why Jan Fankel chose to make the first move. Before the 2 of them could even react, he had uprooted them and the Marks family. Jan Fankel was from the Marks family. That was why she knew the Marks family better than anyone else. Meanwhile, in the Marks family, Caesar and Old Marks were standing in front of a window on the 3rd floor. Both of them looked at the chaos below expressionlessly. They watched as their family's gunmen retreated step by step. Neither of them was worried or afraid. Caesar glanced at his father and said, "It seems that Jan Fankel does not know her family well enough. This is a chance for her to understand that compared to the entire family, her achievements are nothing at all," Yi Zichen said with a smile. At this time, a voice came from behind them. "I can give her a chance, but that depends on her performance." Chapter 26:10. How's the situation inside? Jane Fankel asked. "It's going well, although we encountered quite a bit of resistance," Iyer said disapprovingly. Although they were facing a well-known mafia family, their combat power was not on the same level. The difference in equipment was not something that could be made up for with numbers. Especially the difference in equipment. It was not something that could be made up for with numbers. In this battle, no tactics could make up for the difference in equipment between the 2 sides. One side was still using pistols while the other side was equipped with automatic machine guns. There were also several heavy machine guns mounted on the off-road vehicles. They followed their team members into the manor. This was no longer a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. Jane Fankel's heart was heavy, leading an army to massacre her own family. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't feel happy about it. She hoped that her father could see the situation clearly. He could surrender quickly. That way, she could reduce the number of deaths she caused. However, so many of her family members had already been killed. He did not seem to want to surrender. Since when did her father become so unyielding? Or could it be that she had misjudged him? It shouldn't take long before you can go in, Ayers said. I hope so, Jane Fankel said, try her best to calm herself down. At that moment, the mafia gunmen outside the manor had been completely cleared out. The gunshots inside the manor also died down after a few grenades exploded. Guild leader, the enemies inside the manor have basically been cleared out. Through thermal imaging, there's still 3 people inside the manor. They are all under our control. Should we execute them on the spot? Before Ayer could speak, Jane Fankel hurriedly shouted, No need. My employer and I will go in now. You just need to be on guard. Ayer looked at Jane Fankel. Let's go, Madame Fankel. With a heavy heart, Jane Fankel returned to the home she had grown up in. Ayer smiled. He had seen too many employers like her who were filled with worries. Jane Fankel was not the first, and she would not be the last. Because of some ridiculous reason, she had broken up with her family. Then, she would find them and use violence to convince them. When Jane Fankel entered the manor, she could not help but regret her decision. She looked at the corpses all over the place. She even knew the names of some of them. Now, however, she had buried them with her own hands. They might not be related by blood, but they became a family because of the same surname. Jane Fankel's feelings were getting more complicated. Some of the corpses could no longer be seen clearly. Every scene here was filled with memories for Jane Fankel. At this moment, the mercenary standing at the door cleverly ran to Ayer. Leader, there seems to be a problem. What's wrong? The people I sent into the villa have all disappeared. Disappeared? What does that mean? They've all disappeared from the thermal imaging equipment, and there's no response from their walkie-talkies. Is it signal interference? And there's even a temperature disturbance? Ayer asked with a frown. He had encountered a similar situation on the battlefield before. By lowering the temperature of the environment, the enemy was affecting the thermal imaging equipment. Lowering the ambient temperature seemed complicated. In fact, it wasn't that difficult to do, especially in the interior of the building. As long as a portion of the ice was placed, the ambient temperature could be easily lowered to a point where even thermal imaging instruments could not detect it. Where are the enemies? There are 3 people in the villa. Their thermal imaging is very clear, and they have been in the last room on the 3rd floor. They haven't moved at all. Gather our men and follow me in, Ayer said with a sour expression. He had thought it would be a simple mission. However, the reality had exceeded his expectations. What about outside? There are no more enemies outside, so we don't need to station our men outside. Let's go in and see what kind of monsters are inside. I want to go with you. Jane Fankel looked at Ayer with a serious expression. Ms. Fankel, I don't have time to protect you. I don't need your protection. Jane Fankel was worried that the mercenaries had gone berserk. She might not care about the others, but she would not allow her father and brother to be harmed. Fine, but you better not get in the way of the battle. Soon, Ayer's men were gathered. The villa was huge, and a single living room could fit a dozen mercenaries. The group carefully entered the villa. When they reached the living room, it was empty. There was nothing, not even a body. Something isn't right, Ayer said with a frown. A few mercenaries in charge of scouting ahead gestured to Ayer. The 2nd floor is safe. We can go up. The mercenaries went up to the 2nd floor one after another. Jane Fankel walked in the middle. That way, if anything happened, she would be the first to be protected. However, when they reached the 2nd floor and were about to go up to the 3rd floor, they saw a door in front of them. Jane Fankel frowned at the strange door. The door was engraved with obscure and complicated patterns. The main part of the pattern was a giant dragon, spreading 3 waves of fear and despair to the world. Below the dragon were people kneeling on the ground, shivering. Why is there a door like this here? Jane Fankel was confused. There shouldn't be a door like this in a place like this. It wasn't some kind of art piece. Even if it was, it should be in her father's study or collection room. Ayers signaled his men and forced their way in. One of the mercenaries went up and kicked the door. With a bang, the strange door was kicked open. Then, a cloud of smoke spread out from the door. "Careful, it might be poisonous gas," Ayers said, covering his nose. However, after a while, the mercenaries realized the smoke wasn't poisonous at all. At least, they didn't feel anything unusual. "Let's go up and have a look. Stay alert." I'll sense that the villa was filled with a strange and indescribable pressure. He didn't like this place. If he had a choice, he would rather be on the battlefield than in this depressing villa. The mercenaries went through the door one after another. Jane Fankel hesitated for a while, but she still followed them. For some reason, there was a voice in her head that seemed to be stopping her from going through the door. Chapter 26:11. The moment Jane Fankel stepped through the door, she heard a deafening roar. Gunshots and explosions rang out one after another. Jane Fankel waved away the mist in front of her. She was so frightened that her body froze on the spot. Jane Fankel was frightened by the strange dragon with half of its body emerging from a mist. This was not home, but an unknown land shrouded in fog. Although only half of the dragon's body was exposed, it was already nearly 10 meters long and had powerful claws. Ayer and his mercenaries were currently engaged in a fierce battle with the strange dragon. However, be it guns or grenades, none of them could hurt the strange dragon. Every time the strange dragon waved its claws or spat out its dragon breath, it could kill a few mercenaries. "Fankel, explain to me, what is this? What is this?" Jane Fankel couldn't care less about AL's questions. She stood there in a daze, unable to move her eyes. The scene in front of her, the creature in front of her, was completely beyond her understanding, beyond her worldview. Well, what exactly is this? At that moment, a mercenary's entire body was bitten by the strange dragon. The mercenary let out a strange cry. At the same time, he pulled out his dagger and stabbed it into the strange dragon's neck and jaw. The strange dragon's skin was pierced, and in pain, it spat out a mouthful of acid. The mercenary was instantly dissolved. Ayer's expression changed. That monster seems to be able to be injured by cold weapons. Everyone had no choice but to drop the firearms in their hands. Instead, he pulled out his saber. "Kill!" At this moment, no one chose to retreat. It wasn't that they could ignore life and death. It was because they knew that they had no way out. If they retreated now, they would only die faster. They were the elite of the mercenaries. Elites did not necessarily represent their individual combat strength. It was because they knew when to make the right choice. Everyone threw themselves at the strange dragon without a care for their own safety. The strange dragon could melt a person with its acid breath. However, the other mercenaries had already pounced on the strange dragon. Everyone used all their strength to stab or scratch the neck of the strange dragon with their daggers. They were not warriors who faced death with equanimity. But at this moment, they could be called warriors. The strange dragon's neck was riddled with holes. However, its vitality was still as tenacious as ever. Al suddenly pounced forward, his saber raised high above his head. A 1-meter-long wound appeared on the strange dragon's neck. Fresh blood splashed all over Ayer, and the strange dragon finally collapsed. At this moment, there were only a few people left in Ayer's group. Everyone was injured, and exhaustion was written all over their faces. They had never experienced a battle like this. It was a terrifying and strange battle. However, before everyone could heave a sigh of relief. Countless strange dragon heads emerged from the fog. Everyone looked at the scene before them in despair. Some mercenaries even knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. At this moment, 3 figures gradually appeared in the fog. Jane Fankel's pupils shrank. 2 of the 3 people who appeared were her father, Old Max, and her brother, Caesar. The other person stood on the left side of Old Max, but he had a malicious smile on his face. The strange dragons did not attack the 3 of them. "Fankel, I bet you didn't expect us to meet like this, old Max said with a smile. Caesar licked his lips and looked at Jane Fankel vaguely. His gaze made Jane Fankel very uncomfortable. See, this is the power of the capital you were so proud of. Old Max pointed at the despairing mercenaries. Before our family's power, your power is so insignificant, so laughable. This is not our family's power. Countless thoughts popped up in Jane Fankel's mind. This was not what she understood. How could her family have such power? You can only blame your ignorance. We are supposed to be the kings of darkness. Now is the time to regain our family's glory. With these monsters, you will only bring your family to the grave with you, Jane Fankel said with a cold smile. She calmed down instead, even though her heart was already panicking. Father, since she has betrayed her family and bloodline, let her blood be a part of mine, Caesar said coldly. Old Max did not care about his son's request. He continued to look at Jane Fankel. Fankel, my daughter, I forgive you for your disobedience. Come back to my arms. Old Max opened his arms, as if welcoming Jane Fankel's arrival. Jane Fankel did not move. She felt that there was something about Old Max that made her feel uneasy. Also, Old Max's pupils were different from what she remembered. They were vertical pupils that she could not understand. Fankel, you have failed to live up to your father's expectations. Caesar looked at Jane Fankel with an even colder gaze. There was even a hint of joy in his eyes. Old Max rubbed his nose and said helplessly, Seems like Fankel has chosen a different path. Forget it. If you don't want to accept your family, then so be it. Caesar could not help but grin as he walked towards Jane Fankel step by step. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Jane Fankel. Ire was holding a submachine gun and fired at Caesar. Ah! Caesar was shot in all directions, but the bullets did not penetrate his skin. Jane Fankel looked at Caesar in disbelief. How is this possible? How could her brother ignore the attack of firearms? I will kill you all, Caesar roared. Half of his face was covered in scales. At that moment, a glass bottle was thrown into the mist and landed in front of Caesar. This. Caesar lowered his head and looked at the glass bottle. Damn it! Get away, you idiot! Old Max shouted anxiously. In the next instant, the glass bottle suddenly exploded, bursting with a dazzling white light. Jane Fankel and Ire were also blinded by the dazzling white light. Suddenly, Jane Fankel and Ire felt something grab the back of their necks and forcefully drag them into the mist. In the next instant, their vision turned black. It was as if they had traveled through a different world. They had returned to the other side of the door. A tall and slender woman was standing in front of them. The woman was holding a chain with both hands. The two ends of the chain were connected to hooks. It seemed like it was this pair of hook claws that had dragged them out of the fog. Don't ask anything. If you don't want to die, we better leave this place first. Divine Emperor of the Nine Heavens. Chapter 26:12. After saying that, the woman turned around and walked away. Jane Fankel and Ariel hurried to catch up with the woman. They dared not ask any more questions. In short, everything that happened just now, even the woman before them had shown signs of abnormality. She ran a few kilometers away from the manor. Only then did the woman stop. Jane Fankel was so tired that she could not even stand up straight. She dared not stop during the whole process. Ariel was still full of energy. At the same time, he kept his guard up against the mysterious woman. They did not meet any obstacles along the way. It made him suspect the woman's identity even more. Is this enough? Jane Fankel asked worriedly. No. The woman turned around and looked at Jane Fankel. Suddenly, Jane Fankel saw the woman's pupils. She was so scared that she took a few steps back and fell on her, but Ariel's scalp went numb. He saw it too. He saw that the woman's pupils were the same as old Max's in human pupils. Ariel pulled out his knife and pointed it at the mysterious woman. Are you one of them? The mysterious woman curled her lips. One of them? Aren't you two the same? Us? We have nothing to do with those things. Even Jane Fankel could not convince herself of this. After all, two of her closest relatives had turned into those things. She was not sure whether she would turn into those things or not. Before this, she had no idea about it at all. Maybe she is, but I am not. I have nothing to do with her or her family. Ariel hated Jane Fankel very much. Even if he knew, Jane Fankel might be a victim. Still, he could not help but hate Jane Fankel. You received the dragon blood baptism and are still unscathed. You're telling me you are not a dragon descendant? What dragon blood baptism? What dragon descendant? I don't understand what you are talking about. If a normal person comes in contact with dragon blood, it will be like taking a bath in acid. If a drop of dragon blood is eaten by mistake, it will be like taking the deadliest poison. But you have not shown any abnormalities until now. It means that not only do you have dragon blood, but you have also awakened it. What are you talking about? I don't even know what you are talking about. Don't be in a hurry to deny it. Do you have greater endurance and stamina than ordinary people? I'm a mercenary. I've received the most professional training, so it's not strange that my endurance and stamina are better than ordinary people. When Ire said that, he actually felt a little guilty, because he knew his own situation. His endurance, stamina, and even his body were more like Data. Not only were they slightly stronger than ordinary people, but they were much, much stronger. However, Ire had always kept this secret in his heart and never revealed it to anyone. Some people's dragon bloodline awakening will have a very strong reaction, and the stronger the reaction, the purer the dragon bloodline is. Some dragon descendants' awakening is recessive, and the symptoms are not strong. Your physique is only slightly stronger than ordinary people, so you should belong to the recessive awakening of dragon descendants. Are you trying to tell me that I'm actually related to her? There are far more dragon descendants in this world than you can imagine, but that doesn't mean you are related, the mysterious woman said calmly. I want to know what happened here. What happened to my father and my big brother? Jane Fankel looked at the mysterious woman anxiously. It's complicated, and it's not something you can get involved in, so it's better if you don't know too much. But now that we are involved, do you think we can get out of this? Ire said calmly. He didn't dare to completely agree with the mysterious woman, but he felt that her words had some credibility. Do you remember that there was a third man other than you two? Old Max and Caesar? He's like us. He's like us, but he's also different from us. What do you mean? He's a real dragon, the shadow dragon, Haber Timur Haber, and he's the cause of all this. The mysterious woman looked at Jane Fankel and smiled. And he's your grandfather's grandfather. How is that possible? He looks old enough to be my son. That's the truth. How do you know? The mysterious woman laughed. According to seniority, I should be your grandmother. Is it strange? Dragons have long lives. Although their descendants can't live for thousands of years like the dragons, they still live longer than ordinary people. I'm 99 years old now. That's impossible. Jane Fankel had wanted to say, you look like my daughter. However, she swallowed the words. Jane Fankel was still suspicious. She even suspected that this was some kind of parody show. The mysterious woman saw that Jane Fankel was still suspicious of her, so she continued, Actually, I'm your grandfather's sister, so it's fine if you call me Grandma. Of course, I prefer you to call me by my name, Varian Max. I'm not interested in your relationship. I just want to know what the fuck is going on, Ire said impatiently. I don't know what's going on either. My teammates and I are only responsible for hunting him down, Haber Timur Haber. Hunting him down? Didn't you say he's your grandfather? So what? Since you're hunting him down, where are your teammates? They're where they should be. When are you going to act? That's a real dragon. You can think of it as the scariest creature in the world. Do you think you can kill him as you please? What else? Are you going to get a nuclear weapon and blow him up? If you can, I don't mind, Varianki said. If you can, do you think I need you? Ire said mockingly. For a moment, the three of them fell silent. Varianki sat down and rested. At the same time, she took out a few compressed biscuits and gave them to Ire and Jane Fankel. Ire, who had just finished a biscuit, suddenly stood up. No, I can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Varianki glanced at Ire. You think you can leave? What do you mean? Is there something waiting for us outside? Not on the outskirts, but around us. Chapter 26:13. Do you know why we're here? Varian asked Marks in return. God knows, Air said unhappily. It's because of this oak tree. Valerie patted the thick trunk and said, her grandfather and I planted this tree together. We were only 8 years old back then. I'm not interested in your old stories. Air was getting more and more annoyed. Of course, our father told us that the oak tree was a sacred tree where the gods lived. It could resist the power of the devil. For a long time, I didn't understand what it meant, until the day I awakened my dragon bloodline and came into contact with a world that didn't belong to ordinary people. It was also that day that I saw the devil from hell. Varian was still talking to herself. Ire and Jen Fankel could tell who Varian was referring to when she mentioned the devil. After that, I left the family and joined an organization, the Dragon Slayers. Valerie took a deep breath and continued. In the past few decades, I've been hunting dragons all over the world. I've earned a title, Dragon Slayer. Varian Marks rolled up the sleeve of her arm. There was a dragon tattoo on it. My life's wish is to baptize my body with the blood of Haber Timur Haber. Valerie suddenly revealed a terrifying and ferocious expression. She patted the trunk of the oak tree heavily. The thick trunk shook slightly, and the mist shrouding the area dissipated a lot. Varian was slightly dazed. She changed her mind and stroked the tree trunk lightly. To her, this tree carried too many memories. Under the protection of the oak tree, the devil's power can't reach it. Outside the range of the branches and leaves are the mist and the strange dragons. This is the power of the demonic dragon, Haber Timur Haber. When will the mist dissipate? Dissipate? As long as he doesn't retract his domain, it will never dissipate. Won't he get tired? Maybe, but it's like keeping your eyes open. Whenever you feel tired, you might close your eyes and rest for a while. Besides, Haber Timur Haber's endurance is much stronger than yours. In other words, we will be trapped here forever. My companions are deploying, and they have already informed their helpers. Someone will be willing to help you. Haber Timur Haber has a lot of enemies. It can even be said that he has enemies all over the world. Not long ago, he did a few big things and killed a lot of people. However, he also fought with us. Many of our people died, and he was injured. I think he might have come here to hide, but he neglected me. As one of his pursuers, I know him better than anyone else. Can a helper you found really defeat him? As long as there are enough people, there's hope, Varian said calmly. In fact, even she wasn't confident. After all, she had fought with Haber Timur Haber many times. He knew how cunning Haber Timur Haber was. No one was confident that they could defeat Haber Timur Haber. No one could guarantee that they would be able to kill him. However, this was an opportunity. After all, there weren't many chances for Haber Timur Haber to be injured. Being injured meant that he would be easier to deal with. Varian Marks was happy to choose this moment to deal with Haber Timur Haber. He did not hope to kill Haber Timur Haber. As long as she could injure him more severely, she would have achieved her goal. How long are we going to be trapped here? I still have an important contract to sign. The first thing you should think about now is not the contract, but how to stay alive. Varian glanced at Jane Fankel. In 3 days at most, this place will become a battlefield. Once the battle starts, you two might die here. What should we do? Can't you protect us? Protect you? Don't joke around. Our opponent is a demonic dragon, and it's the most cunning demonic dragon in history, Haber Timur Haber. No one will have the time to protect 2 ants at that time. You have no other choice but to protect yourselves. How do we protect ourselves? You must at least learn how to control and use the power contained in your blood. Although it won't give you sudden power, it will at least increase your magic resistance and immobility resistance. But what should we do? Jane Fankel's first reaction was to refuse. However, the next moment, she understood that this woman who called herself her grandmother would not be merciful to her just because of their blood relationship. Trust me, you won't want to fall into Haber Timur Haber's hands. Varian sneered at Jane Fankel. Why do you think he's hiding here? Why? For your blood, of course, Varian said. To him, you're the closest people to him. Your bloodlines are naturally compatible, so he needs your blood to recover from his injuries. Wait, who are you? My father and brother. They're also, of course, they think they're favored by their ancestors. In fact, they're just fattened pigs that could be slaughtered by Hobber Timor Haber at any time. Jane Fankel felt a little dizzy when she heard Varian's words. Is there no way to save them? Huh. They willingly accepted Hobber Timor Haber's power, so they can't escape. Based on the current situation, we don't have the power to fight Hobber Timor Haber. If the two of them are still alive before our reinforcements arrive, they might have a chance to survive. However, if Hobber Timor Haber feels that his condition isn't good enough to fight against our reinforcements, he will definitely kill the two of them in order to quickly recover from his injuries. Varian Max looked at Jane Fankel. Jane Fankel was eager to give it a try. Don't even think about saving them. No matter how much you say, they won't believe you. They might even expose their whereabouts. You're a merchant, so you should know that it's not worth it. Chapter 26:14. Right now, Chun Zhao was inside the river diagram. Chun Zhao soaked in the divine power potion. Although he couldn't control every cell at will, he was still able to do it. But Chun Zhao could still clearly feel the activity or weakness of every cell. However, the divine power elixir did not work on the cellular level. Chun Zhao's body had evolved many times with the golden key. It could be said to have reached an unbelievably perfect state. Of course, it didn't mean that Chun Zhao's body had evolved to the extreme. It was just that it had reached the limit of what Chun Zhao could bear with his current level. However, as the divine power potion seeped in, Chun Zhao's cells were giving off pleasant feedback. The divine power potion was very complicated, so complicated that Chun Zhao couldn't understand it. This was the domain of alchemists. The first thing Chun Zhao felt was the effect of the potion. Chun Zhao was most familiar with this feeling. After all, the first potion Chun Zhao came into contact with was the strength potion. It was something to lay a foundation for Chun Zhao. It could be said that all of Chun Zhao's power gains in the past were built on the premise of the strength potion. But now, he realized that something in his body had been triggered. Chun Zhao couldn't completely understand what it was either. That was because it was a feeling that was more detailed than that of cells. Right now, Chun Zhao was like a towering skyscraper. This gave Chun Zhao the feeling that someone was tearing down the foundation of a skyscraper and building and strengthening it at the same time. Yes, this was the feeling. There was pain, but there was also comfort. Therefore, it was difficult to tell whether it was pain or comfort or both. The reconstruction process was not fast. Chun Zhao soaked in the divine power potion for 7 days and 7 nights. Chun Zhao realized that his body seemed to have changed. It wasn't a complete transformation. It was more like he was wearing a new set of clothes. From the inside to the outside, his senses had changed. Even his spirit, energy, and spirit had changed. Chun Zhao tested the sensations in his body. Under extreme conditions, the increase in strength was not much. However, it was still an obvious improvement. Chun Zhao returned to soak in the divine power potion. Chun Zhao had a new feeling. Something that had been hidden in his body for a long time exploded like a barrel of gunpowder that had been ignited. Agent X. Chun Zhao had once broken into a certain lab. Then, he unscrupulously poured Agent X into his mouth. Chun Zhao didn't feel much at the time. Even Chun Zhao had almost forgotten about it. That was because Agent X did not bring about too many changes to him. Moreover, Chun Zhao had cultivated many times and increased his realm. They also did not discover the existence of Drug X. He had always thought that it was because he couldn't absorb Agent X. Therefore, Chun Zhao had already metabolized Agent X. But at this moment, Chun Zhao realized something. It's not gone, it's always been there. However, it had turned into molecules and kept flowing in his body. But the divine power potion activated it. Not only had the X drug been activated, but the divine power drug had also made up for its deficiencies. This chemical process makes it even more perfect. It made Chun Zhao's foundation even more perfect. Chun Zhao's body was baptized by Agent X again and again. The extreme chemical reaction between science and magic was happening in his body. Biological functions and thinking were actually chemical reactions. The chemical reaction of amino acids, sugar, and dopamine caused the cerebral cortex to produce a phenomenon of microcurrent discharge. The so-called emotions were actually the electrical discharge of the brain. Chun Zhao realized that his brain had become very active. That was a sign that spiritual energy was spreading outward. Chun Zhao's spiritual energy was actually not very strong. What was strong was Chun Zhao's soul. After all, it was because of his soul key. Chun Zhao had devoured many soul fragments. These fragments fed back to his soul, making it tough and indestructible. But Chun Zhao's spiritual energy was weak. After all, Chun Zhao walked the path of strengthening. He had almost never actively cultivated his spiritual energy. He had always been strengthening passively. When his soul became stronger, his spiritual energy would naturally become stronger. But now, Chun Zhao realized that his spiritual energy was growing exponentially. Agent X didn't just seem to be acting on his body. It was also happening in his brain. However, Chun Zhao's control over his spiritual energy was extremely weak. Chun Zhao's spiritual energy was like a mist. It floated out and became thinner and thinner until he could not feel anything at all. Chun Zhao could not condense his spiritual energy together like those spiritual magic masters and form telekinesis. Chun Zhao could only use it for the most basic function, perception. But when his spiritual energy spread out, it was still within Chun Zhao's domain. Within Chun Zhao's 1,500-meter domain, his spiritual energy dissipated before it could spread out. On the other hand, the things that spiritual power could perceive were clearer and more comprehensive than the things that one's domain could perceive. The two overlapped in terms of perception. This also caused Chun Zhao's spiritual energy growth to be of little value. The spiritual energy's function overlapped with the domain, but it could not reach the domain's range, clarity, and sensitivity. So, spiritual energy was almost useless to Chun Zhao. Of course, to say that it was completely useless was not entirely true. If someone tried to use soul attack on Chun Zhao, they would first have to destroy the spiritual energy that Chun Zhao spread out. The same kind of attack would be weakened before it could even touch Chun Zhao. When Chun Zhao had fought Yedu Rainster last time, he had suffered from a soul attack. That thing was really hard to bear. But there weren't many enemies who could use soul attacks. There were even fewer soul attacks that could threaten him. Of course, Chun Zhao did not mind having more. It was never bad to have more skills. Chun Zhao cared more about the growth of his body and strength. Chun Zhao could not be sure how strong he was now. However, Chun Zhao still had a simple test. That was to release a neutron star with all his strength. He wanted to see how powerful the neutron star was. With the improvement of his basic body and the activation of Agent X, Chun Zhao's body improved in all aspects. Chun Zhao could not use accurate numbers for comparison. However, the power of the neutron star he released could flatten a 100-meter hill. This destructive power was quite impressive. Moreover, the 100-meter range was almost an absolute destructive range. Even Chun Zhao could be heavily injured in this range. Compared to before, the absolute destructive power of a 50-meter range was 2 times greater. The destructive radius was 2 times greater. Compared to a flat surface, it was 4 times greater. Moreover, the destructive power within the radius was 5 times greater. Chapter 26:15. During the third soak, Chun Zhao felt that he had a deeper understanding of his divinized giant form. All the inadequacies in the past were suddenly filled and perfected. The divinized giant form was more advanced than the basic foundation stones and the activation of the X drug. However, the improvement wasn't as great as the two, because an increase in the foundation meant an increase in the base. The improvement of the divinized giant form was obvious, but not as great as expected. What really improved was Chun Zhao's control over his power. Then Chun Zhao soaked in the divine power potion again. However, he felt that the potion's effects had clearly weakened. Chun Zhao thought to himself, this thing is indeed good. I'll get Fate Nitak to make more next time. Of course, the other materials were easy to take care of. It was just the 100 bloodlines of the king of power subordinates. Chun Zhao had to collect them for a year. After all, Chun Zhao couldn't wander around hell every day. He also couldn't meet the subordinates of the king of power every day. After the fourth soak, Chun Zhao had completely absorbed the potion's effects. The originally colorful liquid had now turned into a pure, transparent color. Chun Zhao could feel that the divine power potion was still effective on him. It was just that the amount wasn't enough. Chun Zhao started cultivating in the small world again. Currently, in its complete state, Chun Zhao could create 100,000 high-density white dwarfs weighing tens of thousands of tons at the same time. In terms of pure destructive power, Chun Zhao's full-powered attack could destroy an entire city instantly. Through the physical movement of the 100,000 black balls, he could easily destroy most enemies. However, Chun Zhao felt that this wasn't the limit of the small world. The growth of the small world hadn't reached its limit either. In Chun Zhao's previous trip to hell, the small world had absorbed large amounts of power from the demon lords. However, the absorption method was very crude. The amount of power he could use was very little. There was even more power stored in the small world. Chun Zhao needed to refine this power and make it his true power. As he continued to refine it, the power of the demon lords made the heavenly patterns in the small world flourish. Suddenly, Chun Zhao realized that there was a green fruit in the small world. He didn't know when it had formed. The green fruit was very abrupt and solid. A solid object had actually appeared in his small world. The fruit was very bright and green, as tender as a crisp apple. Chun Zhao tilted his head and looked at the green fruit. With a thought, the fruit fell from the heavenly pattern. Chun Zhao waved his hand, and the fruit landed in his hand. There was nothing special about it. Chun Zhao wasn't afraid of the poison. He took a bite. In an instant, an extremely rich life force spread in his mouth, along with the juicy flesh of the fruit. Ah, Chun Zhao moaned in pleasure. None of the ingredients in the world could compare to this fruit. It was a completely unfamiliar texture, but it was more delicious than any other ingredient. In fact, the taste was not something that ordinary people could eat. This was because ordinary people simply could not withstand such a strong life force. As the saying goes, it's too weak to be nourished. Chun Zhao ate the fruit in a few bites and felt his vitality increase again. Apart from increasing his vitality, the fruit did not seem to have other effects. However, if he diluted the life force in the flesh of the fruit, he didn't know if it could be given to his family. Chun Zhao continued cultivating in the small world. At the same time, he took out a few frozen demon lord corpses. Beelzebub Zophi had helped him seal it to stop the power from flowing out of the demon lord's corpses. While absorbing the power from the corpses, Chun Zhao realized that a second green fruit had formed in the small world. Chun Zhao thought for a moment and put the fruit away. He continued to focus on refining the demon lord's power. Using their power as nutrients, he continuously nourished the small world. Chun Zhao could already feel that the power of the small world had surpassed his own. Just then, Chun Zhao realized that the small world was feeding back to him. The two couldn't be improved separately, because Chun Zhao himself was the one maintaining the small world. First, the control of the small world had increased from 100,000 white dwarfs to 500,000. It was 5 times more than before. At the same time, Chun Zhao could condense 10 compact neutron stars through the small world without using his body. Each one weighed 100 million tons. The speed of condensation also increased greatly. The process that would have taken more than 10 minutes could be completed in a few minutes now. The 10 compact neutron stars circled around him. Chun Zhao could control their speed at will. This meant that most attacks would not be able to get close to him. Chun Zhao cultivated in the river map for almost half a year. However, only a few hours had passed outside. Every time he came out of the river map, he would feel like he was back in the world. Just then, Chun Zhao realized that there were a few missed calls from Zhang Ting in China. Hey, Zhang Ting, what's up? Boss, we finished the education system you asked us to write last time. We also invited a few university professors and experts to discuss it. I'll send the document to you now. Sure, Send it over. Oh, the company's on holiday, right? Everyone's on holiday. Only a few people are doing year-end summaries. They'll be released in a day or two. A proper company wouldn't let the boss go on holiday just because he wanted to. Everyone would just drop their work and go home to enjoy themselves. A normal holiday would require a few people to do the final summary. At the same time, they would also notify their partner companies about the progress. Sure, check your account. I'll transfer some money to you. Go to the bank and exchange it. Then, send a big red packet to those who delayed their holidays. Boss, you're not feeding your employees, you're feeding your enemies. You're giving them such high benefits now. If you can't give them such great benefits in the future, they'll only be disloyal. I'll only be richer in the future, Chen Zhao said, unconcerned. Zhang Ting had a headache now. She even hated Chen Zhao a little. It was impossible for him to resign, not in this lifetime. She really couldn't find a boss more generous and easy to serve than Chen Zhao. This was much more comfortable than when she was her own boss. Oh, boss, do you know the joke of a 40-meter knife? I'm overseas, but it doesn't mean I don't know the jokes online. Say, if X can create a 40-meter knife, what's the effect? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.